Mayor.
for the Charlotte.
Studio, we ready to go live?
our- Change to our video. How are you doing, Ms. Brown? Doing well. I'm doing well. It's almost time for the holidays and turkeys.
Say it one more time.
All right, so I'm now going to call the City Council agenda review. I believe it's, what do we call this now? We call this the agenda overview, and we are going to start with our City Council. We had some questions. Ms. Marie, are there questions that have been submitted that we have to review in advance?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And y'all should all have a copy at your table. And I had a few questions that are actually on consent items. Mr. Bakari and Ms. Mira. I don't know if you've had the chance to look over them yet, or if you would like additional information.
Ms. Ajmira, you requested some questions from Marie, and so I think they've been distributed, but she wanted to know if you had any additional questions.
No, my questions were on the business items.
Okay.
So I don't have anything on consent agenda items. And I appreciate Marie for helping me understand there was one consent item which you provided a response to. So I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on the consent items?
I would probably just pull for comment, not for a separate vote, 17.
All right. So item 17 is police recruit advertising services, and Mr. Bakari would like to make a brief comment about that. Is there any other item that anyone wants to pull from consent? Hearing none, we'll go to we'll go through 18 through 29.
I think we can just vote on them all at once, and
Okay,
I'll
all
comment
right.
just briefly.
And sorry, that would be 17 through 32.
17 through
if it's your
32,
will.
sorry, I saw the consent agenda down here. Okay, so Mr. Bakari,
Move.
your comments?
We'll do a motion probably first. I'll move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Now, Mr. Bakari, were you including item 17?
Yes, I'm just
Okay.
going to make comment. We used to do comments.
Yes, we can do a comment. All right, Mr. Bakari, your
Thanks.
comments.
Yeah, this is one of the first times we've seen some data like this. And again, I'm not going to belabor the point, or even at this point, try to figure out and hold back the vote of the consent item. I want it to move forward at this point. But we don't get to see a lot of the data that I believe at the core of many of our organizations get towards things like recruitment, retention, overall morale. And I would just say that there are some concerning things here to look at. And if you look at your numbers like recruit class 197, large number coming in, 85, but only 48 ended up graduating, 26 resigned during the process, 14 were recycled, a record-breaking number. This could mean a lot of things, and I haven't drawn any conclusions, but I do think this is the kind of exercise we need to start drilling into, because I do personally believe this is indicative of what could be a serious problem down the road. And the culture, the morale issues, the recruitment and retention are all critical to that. So I think it dovetails nicely after this comment into what the manager is already going to be doing in a series of our meetings, drilling into, particularly in CMPD, different topics where we as a council can ask questions of data we want brought back, of things we want to understand. So I'm not going to jump to any conclusions now, but I think it dovetails nicely into that. It was a concern I had. I was glad to hear you were doing that. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of saw some of those numbers there, so that we keep that in the back of our mind in this series of conversations.
All right. I think Mr. Bakari is referring to the manager's presentation along with the chief this afternoon, but that will be on our existing dais after we have the speakers and all of that. So we'll have that included from the manager's report, okay? So with the, I'm sorry, Ms. Sajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I wanted to follow up on Mr. Bukhari's point about police recruitment. I know usually we discuss this item specifically during the budget process. So I think if we can get a head start on this item, so if there are budget implications to it, we are prepared for it ahead of time. Mr. Jones, in the presentation that will be provided to us later today, are you expecting in terms of if we can tie this to our overall budget discussion for next year so that we are really being proactive?
So, Councilmember Ashmore, I believe the last business meeting, I'd mentioned to the council that during the manager's report, we would set aside time to do a deeper dive into public safety. And so we have scheduled, at least I'll present later today, 4 different areas. So to your point, one of the things that I am trying to do, because public safety has been on the majority of the council's mind for a while, is to not reduce it to one half-day budget session.
Right.
But to begin the conversation in November, not in March, and not to boil the ocean tonight, because there are going to be a bunch of opportunities, but to start to field some of the questions that you would like to get more information on. So success tonight would be to introduce the concept of coming back a couple times a month to talk about public safety, and that's quality of life, that's Safe Charlotte, that's violence as a public health crisis, and everything that comes along with it.
That's great. Oh, great to hear that we are getting a head start on this, and we are being proactive. I appreciate that methodology. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
All right. Is there any further question or comment on this item? Hearing none, for adoption of the approval of the consent agenda, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Hearing none opposed, we'll move forward from the consent agenda. So, if I can keep up with you guys, action review. The next topic is for the proposed 2025 federal and state legislative agendas. And I believe, Mr. Jones, do you want to introduce?
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Mayor, members of council. We have 2 items tonight on the action review. One is the proposed 2025 federal and state legislative agendas that has been spent some time in committee, as well as what we do this time of year to have the city clerk go over the proposed 2025 calendar. There's no vote on the calendar tonight other than to prepare you for a potential December vote. And so, Mayor, if there aren't any questions for council, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Fenton. But before I do that, I'd like to make one quick announcement. So many of you know that we've been in search for someone to fill in for Dana after Dana retires. We've had a series of conversations, and after a lot of begging and pleading on my part, Mr. Fenton has decided to stay until July to get us through this next session, because there's so much riding on this next session. So thank you, Dana, for postponing your retirement. And I think folks will be super nice to you based on your presentation tonight. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Jones, Mayor, Council. Thank you very much. I'll say for the record, I'm Dana Fenton. I am honored and privileged to serve as your Intergovernmental Relations Manager. Tonight I'm presenting the 2025 state and federal legislative agendas that were approved by the committee, the Budget, Governance, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, just a few weeks ago. We'll cover the agenda development process, what the factors we use to help you make informed decisions. We'll review the legislative agenda items and then talk about the next steps. Of course, annual legislative agendas communicate your priorities. In this case, these would be the 2025 priorities to the federal and state bodies, the U.S. Congress and North Carolina General Assembly. And we try to base the request upon several issues, and I think the committee took that job very seriously this year. We're looking at things that are achievable in the political climate, in the economic climate. It's actionable through legislation, budgets, grant requests, and intend to strengthen relationships with legislators. This is the agenda development calendar. I'm going to focus your attention on the top row, the yellow row. The committee started its work in October. It culminated in November with the proposed legislative agendas, and we're here tonight for the action review. We have a number of things to do in December and January and beyond, so I will get to that at the end of the presentation. Now let's turn to the proposed legislative agenda for the U.S. Congress. Mobility has always been a top priority for the Charlotte City Council, and this year, this coming year, we're going to be facing the start of reauthorization of the Federal Surface Transportation Program. This is a 2-year process that provides federal matches ultimately for local road and highway, public transportation, and other types of transportation projects. And again, this is a 2-year process, and a bill will typically not be enacted until the fall of 2026. And then we would also continue competing for federal funding opportunities. Aviation, secure funding for the 4th parallel runway and other airport projects. As you know, earlier this year, the airport was awarded a letter of intent for the 4th parallel runway projects. Now we need to get our congressional delegation to sponsor a budget amendment to secure the first tranche of funding for that project. And this is the same process that's used for a lot of other things of this nature. The letter of intent, think of that as an authorization for the Congress to appropriate the funding. We had to do this also for the Lynx Blue Line extension back in the last decade. Talent and workforce development, we have several things in here. It continues your support for immigration policy and regulatory changes, digital inclusion, and corridors of opportunity. A couple of new adds this year to this would be support reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that directs funding to local areas to support talent and business needs, and also support funding for child care resources to replace the pandemic era funding that has expired. And also continue, we have been very active this year, though actually the Corridors of Opportunity team has been very active, and also a few other departments here, your Information and Technology Department especially have been very active in trying to seek competitive grants for their areas. Public safety. The committee felt very strongly that, I'm sorry, I had the wrong script there. This is a staff recommendation. The airport would like to see additional staffing for the security screenings that are done for folks who are arriving at the airport with their bags ready to go on a flight. And then also for the international arrivals when folks arrive from overseas. The staffing has been somewhat spotty the last few years, and it has created a problem at times. The environment. The city will continue supporting the policies and funding to implement and meet the federal forever chemical mandates, but also to protect the local governments like ourselves from unreasonable liability by advocating for liability protection for municipal drinking water, wastewater, stormwater utilities, et cetera. As you know, with the forever chemicals, those were chemicals not created by us, but rather by industry, and we were obliged to treat that water as it came down the pipeline. And then housing, one would be to continue supporting reforms to the federal housing voucher programs, and then also support greater financial services or financial resources for housing programs such as the CDBG Home Investment Partnership, lead-based paint hazard and healthy homes, and the low-income housing tax credit. And with that, I'll now turn to the proposed state legislative agenda. The first one is one you have seen several years in a row now, that is support the region's efforts to improve its competitiveness and grow the economy through investments to the transportation network, and that would involve taking the draft legislation to the General Assembly for enactment. And then also at the same time, I need to say this is really not really a legislative agenda item per se, but rather we would continue working on securing access to the portion of the O line from the Mecklenburg-Iredell County line to downtown Mooresville. The next one is aviation. In continuation of last year's agenda item to support the North Carolina Airport Improvement Program that provides funding for capital needs at the 10 commercial service airports in North Carolina. The environment. Earlier this year, Charlotte Water initiated they published a notice of intent to modify their interbasin transfer agreement that takes water from the Catawba River Basin to the Rocky River Basin to accommodate growth that's occurring in the eastern part of our county. And that includes the towns of Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville, Matthews, and Mint Hill, and of course the city of Charlotte. And even recently, the town of Mooresville requested a similar certificate. And there's a lot of other utilities in the state that are considering initiation of their own certificates or modifications to address their water needs as well. The reason I bring this up in the context of the state legislative agenda is that there have been some rumblings from some northern neighbors of ours about maybe there's too much water being drawn from the river. And there's some environmental concerns are being brought up as well. That data is being studied. The process that was kicked off this year by Charlotte Water is a 3-year process. There will be an environmental impact study done through the Department of Environmental Quality at the state of North Carolina, and that will provide information that's needed for the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission to make a final decision on this modification request. The court system, the committee was very strongly desirous of addressing court system funding, and simply is support the county state court agencies as they seek the allocation of additional state funding for their operations. And finally, public safety. In the public safety area, the committee was really wanting to address the issue of the arcade gaming establishments that are all around the city. And there is legislation being planned for the next session from some members of the General Assembly. These are members of the majority party in other parts of the state where their localities are having to face the dilemma of these different establishments. And they are looking at ways to help, especially with the planning and zoning issues and code enforcement issues that are, and also the public safety as well, that are inherent in some of these establishments. And with that, the next steps, we'll be taking input tonight from the City Council. If there's any input that needs to be directed back to the committee, Mayor, the committee is poised to take that up next Monday at its December meeting. And then we'll be back on December 9th with for requesting consideration of the state and federal agendas. And then we have several events next year, especially just to give you a few, we would be planning for a state delegation briefing with our Mecklenburg County state folks anywhere between January 13th and January 23rd. And then congressional briefings would be held in conjunction with the National League of Cities Conference that's going to be held in Washington, D.C., March 10th through the 12th. And with that, Mayor, I'll be glad to stand for any questions.
All right. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, Dana. You've been a trooper in all of this, and so that's really good. But before I turn it over, one of the things that I've noticed is that as we are beginning to do meetings and we're having conversations among each other, that I can't see people that sit at the corners. And I can't see who's making the motion and who's not doing this. So I'm going to work really hard to identify the speaker that would make the motion, and then come around so everybody has a chance to speak. If you choose not to speak, that's okay, but everybody to have a chance without me leaning and guessing who had their hand up. We can do 2 cycles of it, we can do 3. It just depends on what item that we're working with. and I believe that Ms. Watlington may be my first person to try this out on. So Ms. Watlington, any comments, and then we'll go right to Mr. Bakari.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got three things. The first one is on slide number 7. I may have missed it, forgive me, but I just wanted to hear in that first bullet, continue supporting immigration policy and regulatory changes. What exactly do we mean by that?
Yeah, we've had a position on this for several years. It would be substantially the same. It would be support the workforce needs of people. For example, some folks come over here with H-1B visas to work. They have to bring their family members over. And there's all sorts of issues that crop up when you bring family members over, whether a spouse can work, whether a son or daughter can stay after their 18th birthday, that type of thing.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then my next question is, as it relates to the environment for, I think specifically the state legislative agenda on 13, as we start to see data centers across the country move to more urban areas, we know that it has an impact on the water usage in those localities. And so I'm wondering if that's been a point of discussion as it relates to our legislative agenda, as we specifically talk water and as we think about how we're trying to really attract and recruit more fintech and IT-related businesses.
Yeah, from what I know is that, of course, the growth here has been phenomenal, with a lot of other urban areas as well. And these issues are being watched very carefully. There's a benefit to the entire state by the Charlotte region and the Raleigh region and others growing and bringing in more tax revenues, for example. At the same time, we need to be cognizant of the needs for the rural areas. We know that the areas up north want to expand industrially. They want to make sure they have enough water. And so those types of things are definitely going to be talked about this coming session.
Sure. So I would love to see us champion policies that incentivize data centers and the like, that look at different ways to provide energy in a renewable and a sustainable fashion, because I think that that is going to continue to be a growing sector, and certainly we as a city would want to be a part of it. So just want to make sure that we're thinking about how we do that in a sustainable way. So if we could add that to the discussion, that would be fantastic. And then finally, as it relates to the public safety measures on slide 15, to implement stronger arcade gaming regulations and protections for communities negatively impacted. For some time now, I know I've been working with CMPD over the years around alcohol outlet density. Many of the same ills that you see where you see arcades being set up are also seen where you see a higher density of alcohol outlets that are permitted for off-premise consumption. So I would love to see that coupled with this, because I think that they're happening in tandem.
Yeah, in terms of the arcade gaming regulations, I know that the density of those outlets expressed through separation distances will be considered. In terms of the outlets that sell alcohol, wine and beer, for example, that's a whole different issue. And I think, just as we talked a few years ago, I just don't see that being something that could be driven forward this coming year.
Mm-hmm. I understand. I would still like it to be included, because I think that there are so many similar issues, and exactly what you were talking about from a zoning standpoint in terms of distance apart, all of those things, those same kinds of measures could be used, not just for as we think about entertainment districts and things like that, but specifically for outlets that sell for off-premise consumption. So I would like to see it at least included in the discussion. Thank you.
So I want to make sure that what you like to see is something that the committee would have and address. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Bakari, Mr. Driggs, Mr. Graham?
It's a quick question. I think you touched on it, but I'd like to get a longer explanation in terms of where we are with mobility. We were thinking that this would appear in the 24 legislative session in terms of the 1 cent sales. Do we have any updates since we're 2 weeks away from the election and they've already been meeting?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of what you had to say, Mr. Graham.
Do you have any updates on where we stand with the mobility tax that we're supposed to try to get in this abbreviated session?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. That's a good question. There was an intervening event called Hurricane Helene, and that has taken a lot of the bandwidth from legislators. They've already passed, I think now, 3 different packages of relief for Western North Carolina. And so right now, it looks very iffy that anything could be done this year. So we'd love to have that done this year, but we have it on here for 2025 just in case it's needed.
Okay, because I've been spending a lot of time in Raleigh the last 2 weeks. I'm working with the governor-elect on this transition, and depending on who you talk to, I get the feeling that it won't happen in '24. And Mr. Manager, do you kind of concur with that in terms of?
I'm absolutely not going to concur with that. So,
Mr. Graham?
The point being is that we will continue to take every avenue we can, whether it's in the short session or the long session, but I don't think we should tap out at any point until the session is over.
No, I concur with that as well, but at some point, reality sets in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem?
No comment, Mayor. Thank you, Dana.
Ms. Ashmere, this will be coming to your committee. Do you want me to move on to Ms. Molina?
Yes,
our Okay.
committee voted,
I know, but if you had any other amendments or choices?
all the changes that were recommended by the committee have been incorporated into this. So I appreciate Dana and our consultants for working around the clock to address all the concerns that were raised at our committee meeting. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Molina, do you have any comments?
Well,
Or
it's not really a comment, it's more of a question for Dana. I know that there's just a bit of overlap. The North Carolina League of Municipalities has a legislative policy committee, and I actually serve on that committee. So a few of the items that I see, there's overlap with the legislative policy agenda for the North Carolina League of Municipalities and some of what we would like to see from Charlotte. Do you have any reference points on, like what the league is going to present? And
At this point, no. I don't have I don't have an idea what they're going to present, but it's been fairly consistent through the years. They're big on infrastructure funding,
yeah,
trying to get local sources of revenue to help build infrastructure.
there was one in particular that I brought up in the last meeting about the arcades, because of, there being a general interest to, kind of mitigate those.
Right.
And I was told that there are actually cities in our state that actually like those types of businesses as opposed to them being a nuisance. And so what they did was kind of rate the items A, B, and C. And so the A's are actually going to be presented. The B's are kind of things that would come up as a possibility, and C's were items that won't be presented, and that made it to the C list. And I mean, I was really like putting our position out there, but I didn't want to be like Charlotte in the room to say like, we want it, because everyone would have got mad at me, so. But I'm really excited to see, what you're able to, get. And I know you're tenured, I know you got great relationships there, but we're really interested. It just didn't seem to be kind of a consensus across our state, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. You talk to different areas of the state, they have different responses.
Yeah.
And, but we understand that, there's been legislation passed, or not passed, but introduced the last 2 sessions, in 21 and 23. And there seems to be more urgency this time around from some legislators. So we're hopeful on that. That's what we're pinning our hopes on.
All right, really great. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dana.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you bring up slide number 7? I want to piggyback off Councilmember Watlington and ask the question about the immigration policies. I know that these recommendations were given on October 7th prior to the federal election, but I know that the new leadership is going to have immigration policies that we as that we may not agree upon on a city council level. So I wanted to know from the chair what the directions or what the thinking was there. I'm a little concerned about stating that we're going to be aligned with the certain immigration policies on a federal level. So is there any input or detail?
I would be glad to take that. I know that this was moved out of committee the day before the election, and we haven't changed this at all. You have a policy on things, or actually it was adopted by the city council in 2019. I think it's called the it's the Compact on Immigration. It sets out in there what the goals of the city are, including addressing the workforce development aspect, also supporting a pathway to citizenship and other things. So that's what we would continue. That's how we would approach this. And I know that the incoming administration has some different ideas, but also, you know, we still have a bicameral legislature that has to adopt these things. So there could be some other opinions that are brought forward.
I understand that, but we're saying that I think that's just a blanket statement that I don't know that maybe we can consider. I don't want to continue to support the incoming legislators or at a federal level, their immigration policies, just with a blanket statement. So I don't know if there's more detail that we can have.
Yeah, there's going to be more detail in the supporting position statement, but we're going to try to keep it to what you've seen in the legislative agenda the last few years. And actually, since 2020, I believe, is when it was first put in there. You would follow the Compact on Immigration. And by putting a general statement like this doesn't mean that we're supporting the incoming administration or folks who have different opinions, but there's going to be more information provided.
And when you say we, do you mean council?
We?
Yeah, you said we.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I think I was referring to the position statements that we typically draft. It's going to stay close, if not identical, to the Compact on Immigration and other documents like that have been supported by City Council.
Well, just because this is on the federal legislative agenda, we're talking about continue to support immigration policies. We know what's forthcoming, so I'm not in agreement with that. So I don't know if we want to change that, and I know we'll discuss that more or vote on it in December, but I would ask council to also consider changing the language, maybe put some more detail in that, because I'm just not comfortable with that statement.
Wait, Ms. Ashmere, the manager wanted to respond to this, so if we could do that.
So, thank you, Mayor. So Dana, let me make sure that I'm clear on what you're saying. I believe that bullet means the council we're going to continue to support the positions of the council related to immigration policy, digital inclusion, and corridors of opportunity.
That is correct.
That's what I read in it, too. So we're not changing our policies in terms of what we believe in, and this would just continue now. We don't know what's going to come down the pike, and, you know, but this is where we stand. And so, any other?
So again.
Ashmere wanted
okay.
to say something about it as well.
Yeah, so Ms. Johnson raises a good point. In fact, Councilmember Mayfield had raised this issue at our committee meeting, and that was for additional request for federal officers. And we got a clarification from the airport that those additional resources will only be staffed to meet airport demands, not to enforce federal laws, in terms of federal immigration laws. Let me just be very clear. But going back to that slide that Ms. Johnson has raised, continue supporting immigration policy. I think, Dana, I guess because I have seen this DAC a few times, I get where we are, but I think it can be interpreted differently. So I think maybe including the compass that we all adopted back in 2019, I think it was called welcome.
Yes.
Welcome something. So if we can just clarify that, that was unanimously adopted and approved by this council.
Right.
So if you can just include that language so that we are all on the same page, because our language is that we are a welcoming city, and we recognize that immigrant community contributes to our city economically, culturally, and in other ways. And it also includes the GDP impact and so on. So I think having that specific language of whatever the policy it's called would be very helpful. But I also wanted to respond to Councilmember Molina's question about arcades. That was a very passionate discussion at the committee level. In fact, Councilmember Mayfield and I wanted to see more teeth into it. But I understand that I also recognize the reality of the makeup that we have in Raleigh. So, in fact, I'm not sure if you all had an opportunity to read the memo from Allison Craig, but Allison has really provided details around some of the changes that are in the UDO that prevent some of these establishments from operating at certain locations where they have to maintain certain distance from neighborhoods. There are also limited hours. They can only operate till 10 p.m. So those requirements will help us keep our communities safe and address CMPD's concerns while we wait for the state to see whether that item will get ever upgraded from C to A list. But I appreciate Allison's work on it, because that is an issue that I often hear about, not just from East Charlotte, but also it's an issue in other parts of the city, West Charlotte, East Charlotte, and even the one establishment off of Providence that certainly has created some very valid concerns among our residents. That's all I have.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Ms. Ashmira. So if we could add that language that we will support the City of Charlotte Compass Agreement or whatever that is specifically, because again, this is on the federal legislative agenda, and we're saying we're going to support immigration policy and regulatory changes. So we don't want, next year for someone to say, well, it was what's the term? Unintended consequence, right? If this is a foreseeable change that needs to be made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Brown?
Councilmember Brown, don't have any comments?
All right. So you have a question, Ms.?
It's not a question, it's just, it came up in the conversation. It's really for the clerk's office. Some time ago, I know there was a discussion about having a repository of the active council policies so that we could go back and refer to things like the immigration policy, et cetera. Can we get an update after this as to where that stands? Because I just think it's very important that we as members of the council can go back and look at what we've adopted. I know it's buried in the minutes somewhere, but a little more easily found, that's all.
Okay. We'll see how we can get that reviewed and an assessment of it. So, okay. I think that covers all of the items that we had for the legislative requests. And now let's go to our calendar requests with the city clerk. Does everyone have the copy of the calendar that was sent out? If you do, okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm delighted to be before you this afternoon to just briefly give an overview of the proposed 2025 calendar. You all have a copy of the proposed calendar in front of you. I think you may have also received a copy in your packet on Thursday. And what I will say to you right off the top is that there are no sweeping changes in the calendar. A couple of exceptions I will note, though. One of them is that the annual strategy session has been added at the end of January, as it was for 2024. And the summer schedule is a little different than it was last year, or this year. For 2024, there were no meetings in August, and for 2025, there are the addition of the council committee discussions and on the August 4th meeting and the business meeting for August the 11th. Overall, there are not any significant changes to the number of meetings that you have annually. This year, you had 8 committee council discussion meetings. There will be 8 of those scheduled for 2025. There were 16 business meetings for 2024. There will be 18 business meetings with the addition of the August 4th and August 11th meetings. And there are, there were 11 zoning meetings for 2024. There will also be 11 zoning meetings for 2025. 3 fifth Mondays where there are no meetings, and 4 budget workshops were scheduled for 2024, and the same is scheduled for 2025. So that is, and I will also point out to you that exceptions to the calendar are noted in red. Those are national meetings that some of you may be attending, or either there may be like the NLC meetings, the North Carolina League of Municipalities meetings, ICMA, and other such meetings. I think there's also on the calendar, the NAACP. Charlotte will be hosting the meeting here, and I think that has also been added to the calendar. So that is what I have to present, and I welcome any questions or any feedback that you would have concerning this. There is no action for this on tonight's agenda, but it will come back on December the 9th for a vote of the council. So if there are any changes or any revisions you'd like to see, we have ample time to discuss those.
Okay. I'll follow up with Ms. Johnson, and then we'll come around. Ms. Johnson, any questions? Ms. Molina, any questions? Ms. Ajmira?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, while adding those 2 meetings in August, what's the count of the business meeting total versus what we had in 2024? Are they about the same, you said?
Well, there were 16 business meetings in 2024. There will be 18 business meetings in 2025. And one of those is the addition of that August 11th meeting. And the other one is the 2024, there was a meeting canceled in September because of the overlap of the North Carolina League of Municipalities meeting, I believe. So that meeting has been added back. So there's just 2 additional meetings, business meetings for the year. And we're also taking into account or removing meetings from the calendar because of the election schedule. You will also notice that the election, the primary is September the 9th for 2025. There is no business meeting scheduled for that particular night, which would be a business meeting. And for the general election, which is on November the 4th, there would be a council committee discussion that evening, but there is no council committee discussion meeting scheduled for that evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Graham? No. Mr. Driggs? Mr. Bakari? Ms. Watlington?
Yes, I've got three. The first one is, I see here, it says to be scheduled legislative action review and evaluations for the city attorney / city clerk, city manager. I'd like to see those evaluations slotted. I know that was something we've discussed once before, so I know that it is noted here. But I know especially in the summertime, we start to have trouble with people's schedules, so I'd love to see that slotted as a meeting since we know it's going to need to happen. Also, I just wanted to clarify, for budget workshops, I see the two, and then the budget presentation and adjustments, and then the straw votes. When you say 4 workshops, are you including those particular?
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, I know this is standard procedure at this point, but just to be clear, I wanted to verify that there, in terms of the methods of our meetings, that was captured. I know that we captured it in previous years, but just didn't see it here. I don't anticipate a change, but just wanted to make sure that it was called out.
The method,
Yeah, so committee meetings being virtually, council meetings being in person, et cetera, et cetera. I know that that was something that we've added to the top of the meetings before, so I just wanted to make sure it was included in the policy we adopt.
Ms. Watlington, can you help me go through with that? Tell me, you're saying at the top of the calendar to include additional descriptive?
Yeah, it should be in the one from last year or the year before, whatever. It's been there, I think, every year. And I don't, like I said, I don't anticipate it to be a change, but just wanted to include the method of the meetings at the top.
The method of the meetings at the top.
whether in person or virtual?
Right.
Okay. Well, all your business meetings, zoning meetings, all your official meetings will be in person, and committee meetings, there's an option.
Okay.
So we can add that.
All right. So I believe that this is something that we will vote on. So
On December
if-
9th.
On December 9th. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I walked in, but I know that we were talking about the calendar, and we added 2 more dates. Is it to make up for something that we have in the calendar, the 2025 calendar, or something that we may possibly miss? Sorry, Clerk.
Well, there are a couple of meetings that were taken off of the calendar because of the election cycle that will be.
This year, 2025.
2025. Your September, I believe it's September the 9th and November 4th meetings are not, they're not a part of the 2025 calendar, but we added the business meeting for August the 11th. That has been added back, as has your council committee discussion for August the 4th. There were no meetings in August in 2024.
None at all, 0.
There was, there were 2, the zoning meeting and the second business meeting, but the first 2 meetings of August were not scheduled for August of 2024. But they have been scheduled for August 2025. There are 4 meetings in the month of August 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the calendar?
No action
Until
required.
on December the 9th,
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
December the 9th is going to be it's going to be a very important agenda to be prepared and ready to go. So maybe I'm just trying to push it along a little bit faster, so, okay. I'm sorry?
So there are changes that was proposed by Councilmember Watlington to add those 3 evaluations to our calendar, just so that everyone's calendars are blocked ahead of time, where staff is not trying to trying to get everyone in the room. I think it would be important to have those scheduled and before we approve this.
I think we had that suggestion as well as the other one to make sure that we had them all labeled correctly.
Yes.
For whether or not they're virtual or in person. So, all right, so
Duly
we
noted.
have that, and we will come back, the clerk will come back and at our next meeting on the 9th.
Yes, ma'am.
All right? Let's see, so I believe that carries us through all of our consent agenda. It includes all of our action agenda review. Let's see, do we have coming up next? I think that's it. So we'll start on time downstairs, And if everybody can get in, we can get there and get through this. I did want to say that Councilmember Smudgy Mitchell will not be attending the meeting today. I didn't hear from Luana. Okay. Okay. So didn't know that. So Ms. Mayfield and Mr. Mitchell. All right, let's go downstairs. We do have a full speakers agenda as well as a number of other items, I think, that we have to follow through.
Meeting starts at 6:30.
I know, but we can do some other things, I think.
Okay. Mayor, wait a minute. Studio, wait one moment. Studio, we're not ready to go live yet.
One today is public safety update. So, Mr. Jones, I'm going to open it up for you and see where we are on this.
So thank you, Mayor.
Yes, we're on.
So thank you, Mayor, members of council. And Amanda, am I getting the presentation pulled up? Okay. So as we have discussed over the past few weeks, there's been a concern about having enough time to talk about public safety. And so what I committed to at the last council meeting was to bring back during the manager's report a series of conversations dealing with public safety. And it goes across the whole horizon, everything from illegal truck parking to homicide. And so what I didn't want to do was put us in a place, as Councilmember Mira alluded to earlier, that we are trying to cram something into a budget process, as opposed to try to lay a foundation for the beginning of a discussion that we would have, not just tonight, but also at the next business meeting and the first business meeting in January, as well as the first business meeting in February. So with that said, I'll start off with this public safety update, and Jason, I guess somebody's going to drive the slides. And I talked a bit about the schedule, and so what's important is there are a number of issues that I think we've been talking about for a while, and maybe some types of solutions to various issues. I'll go back to May of 2020, when there was a series of discussions about what's happening in terms of violence in our community, which led to a series of discussions at each committee meeting with recommendations that came back that became our Safe Charlotte approach, an approach that has gotten accolades from across the country. But there are a lot of things that came out of that report that I think are extremely important, that Charlotte has become a leader in trying to do things that are other than just policing. So we want to talk a bit about that, as well as a quality of life approach. Then we have, at the end of January, the CMPD annual crime report. And what really kicked this off, even before May of 2020, was a city-county collaboration to look at violence as a public health crisis. So with that said, if I go to the next slide, we had our Safe Charlotte report, and again, we talk about the three-legged stool with a good paying job, a workforce development, and we start to talk about a safe place to live, housing, and we also talk about mobility, a way to get back and forth. We've talked a lot about those areas over the course of the last year or so. So I wanted to spend some time to focus on another piece of that, which is safety. And then lastly, before I turn it over to the chief, I just want to go back to the Safe Charlotte pillars, where we talked about a safe, healthy and inclusive neighborhoods, when we talked about affordable housing, when we talked about an economic climate where businesses can thrive, and how do we implement a mobility network. So tonight, it's really setting a foundation, a bit of a baseline with some data. My ask is that I know there's so many questions that we have. If we can begin to get those types of questions on the table, it will help us frame what the next few meetings will be like, and maybe there's some things that we're missing. I also hope that we don't try to solve everything tonight in this first presentation, because again, we will be talking about public safety between now, which is November, all the way up into February, even before we have our first budget workshop. So with that said, Mayor, if there aren't any questions, I'd like to turn it over to the Chief.
Chief, thank you for being here. What I'd like to say is that there's lots of opportunities to write down what you want to come back and see, and there are going to be 3 additional sessions that you can have and do that. So, Ms. Johnson, we'll start with you.
I just have one question. Is it realistic that we can get a presentation and be able to ask any questions in 15 minutes?
That's what I was trying to say, is that I think this is an idea of how do we get the questions that you have, and then that will have them time to actually work on some of the responses instead of it being like hurried and rushed. So what I'm asking is jot down your questions so that they can get into the process so that we can have the next meeting, which is December the 9th, those answers.
I just think this is a very, very important issue that
It is.
that 15 minutes is just not a responsible amount of time for us to jot down questions and not be transparent. So that's just my thought.
Well, then, I think if that's the way that the council sees it, if that's your comment, we'll have the chief give us our presentation, and then we can do the questions as a refresh when he comes back. Okay?
All right.
Chief Jennings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Manager, Mr. Manager. Appreciate it. I'll try to get through it. If we have a chance to get to some questions, I'll be happy to answer whatever I can. What we're going to do is kind of I want to share some of the crime trends that is almost about 35 years of data to kind of give you a perspective of where we've kind of come and gone to as a city when it comes to crime. So the first chart that you're seeing here is going to be the violent crime count. You can see a decrease in year to date from 1990 all the way to the current year, 2024. The trends that you see in the violent crime reductions, we've had some, particularly in 2020, you can see the increase in violent crime that is up to 8,068. And then since then, we have seen crime reductions every year, significant crime reductions in 2021 and 2022. 2023 saw flat in violent crime, and we are currently heading in 2024 to probably be on that same trajectory to hopefully be flat in violent crimes once again for 2024. It's going down, right? Well, it's about flat right now. We're right now about a 1%, but the trajectory from the middle of the year has been continuing to go down, so we're making progress there. So, all right, then we're gonna look at, which is, we don't often put this chart up, but to talk about the violent crime per capita, per 100,000 in population, and I'm gonna have some other slides with that as well. But if you look at the green line, that is the trend of population within our jurisdiction. And then you look at the blue line, that is per capita, the rate of violent crime victimization per 100,000 people. So that has consistently gone down. We saw a little spike in 2020, but now we're starting to see that to go back on a downward trend, which is pretty encouraging when you start looking at the population growth and how we're able to keep crime under control and manage violent crime in particular. So the next chart, we're going to talk about homicides in particular. If you look back into the early 90s, we had some major homicide rates, and as we go into 2020, we're also looking at those numbers kind of mirroring what we saw in the early 90s, but we're also seeing that these numbers are kind of the last few years. We're trying to keep them a little bit steady. You know, in 2022, we saw a number of 110, but over the last 34 years, you know, we are looking at a homicide rate that's kind of unpredictable. Those are some of the most difficult ones to get in front of and to make sure that we're keeping homicide rates down. But also, I can tell you that our detectives in the homicide division are stellar detectives. The solvability rate, they're always above the national average of homicide solvability. So far this year, the number, even though it says 99, we just had one that came off of the numbers because it was ruled by the district attorney's office as being self-defense. And we expect a couple of more of those. Every year we kind of have a few at the end of the year that come off based on the DA's ruling of being self-defense. So we are actually at 98 versus 80 at this time last year. And again, the homicide rate per capita per 100,000 population, this chart speaks for itself, but generally we kind of hover around 10 homicides per year per 100,000 population. This year looks to be to finish the same. We did have some low numbers in the in late 2000s that were down to about 7, and one year in particular was 2014. We had 5 per capita, and that was a homicide. I believe that was about 48 homicides that year. That was a really successful year when it comes to how many homicides that we had. So the next chart, year-to-date property crime counts, and property crime has been a challenge for the last couple of years. And if you look, I want to point out specifically, even though the trend continues to go down, I want to point specifically to 2023 when the spike there with 38,187. That was specifically run and driven by our Kia Hyundai thefts. And if you remember the issues that we had with the Kia Hyundai challenge with teenagers that were stealing those vehicles, and that wasn't just a trend in Charlotte, that was nationwide. We are now starting to see some of those efforts kind of quell that trends this year. So we're actually hoping to see a reduction in auto thefts this year. So even though that was a pretty big spike back in 2023 that we were looking at, we're wanting to try to get that back down to, if you want to call it normal levels, but get it back down to where we're managing those Kia Hyundai thefts that we saw that spiked our property crime. So next chart, property crime per 100,000. And if you, again, that trend is something, as you see, the green line again is the population growth within our jurisdiction. And we're seeing the steady decline in property crime per capita for our city. And then Part 1 crimes. These are the crimes that we report to the FBI that are being reported out. That's across the country that every agency reports out. And again, we're looking at the trajectory of the Part 1 offenses, some of your most serious crimes that is continuing to, even though you have your ebbs and flows, it still is continuing to go on a downward trend. And again, we'll look at the chart based on per capita, and that speaks for itself as well. So we talk a lot about, what are we able to effectively measure within when we start talking about crime. And we look at the preventable versus non-preventable. And it's very difficult for us to sit and say, well, we prevented, 15 homicides last year, or we prevented a certain amount of crimes. That's one of those intangibles that we sit around and discuss all the time as our staff, is that we really have the efforts to show what we do on a daily basis within Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. However, it's difficult to say the effect of that, but all we know is that when we look at recidivism rates of those, particularly juveniles that we have within a lot of our services, that we see success in those areas. But to be able to measure those crimes that we prevented
is very difficult. But one of our philosophies that's not anything new, we didn't come up with this, but you look at the crime triangle, victim, opportunity, and offender, and our goal is always to disrupt one of those elements in the crime triangle. And if you take away one of those, you don't have the criminal element that we have to deal with. So some of the most challenging ones, as I mentioned earlier, homicides, domestic violence, and just impulsive acts of random or non-random crimes that are difficult, like a lot of our homicides that we've seen this year, and we try to track what started those homicides. Arguments seem to be one of the number one issues that we are dealing with. So a simple argument turns into a homicide, and that's really difficult for us to be able to say how effective can we be in preventing homicides. So I will go back, and just another thing we looked at that's not on the chart here is the number of crimes that we have with that are as far as random crimes. Particularly, we talk about people that are minding their own business, that don't have any culpability or involvement in any of the crimes. That we often can see that high-risk lifestyles, for example, are a contributing factor to being victimized in violent crime. We have very few numbers of people who are not involved in high-risk lifestyles that are victimized in violent crime, but it does exist. But at the same time, we have to make sure that these don't escalate to the point to where it becomes a homicide or an assault with a deadly weapon or a shooting, or even at the same time getting some innocent party involved in a dispute that two people might be having. So we have concerns there as well. And then our efforts, like I said, our efforts within our department, we continue. Every year I look at our numbers as far as the proactive work from our officers who are doing just a phenomenal job, that it continues to go up. You know, just when I think that we've reached a peak of gun seizures, we've reached a peak of zone checks, of arrests, things that our officers are doing on a daily basis, every year the numbers continue to grow and get higher and higher. So that's just a testament to the men and women who go out there every single day, despite any distractions, that they're going to be doing the work and they're keeping our community safe. So very proud of those efforts. Last thing I do want to mention is we will be doing the end-of-year public safety report that will come out the week of January as well. So hopefully we'll have all those numbers that will end up for the year of 2024. We'll have any homicide numbers, and if we have any that come off due to self-defense, that we'll have as accurate as we possibly can to be able to report out and make sure that we have finalized numbers for everyone to see. So I think I finished with like 1 minute left, 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Chief, for doing this. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I think this is time that would be well spent. So why don't we actually think about this and see where what we might want to make possible when December the 9th comes up. And Chief, I guess one of the things that I think about is that we've been growing really so rapidly.
Yes.
And I don't know how to calculate your strategy, or if our strategy needs to change as a result of population or where development occurs or what's going on. So could you at some point speak to the idea of what makes it possible for us to get this data, but also to make sure that people understand that this was something that we did not want to occur or should not have occurred? And
As far as population growth?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the things I've stood before council before, and I said I never want to make an excuse that the population's growing, so crime's going to grow with it. And we don't want to lean on that, so we really haven't pushed that data out probably as much as we should, but I think it is good informational data for council to be aware of. I think we're probably the fastest growing major city in the country, and if we continue on that, then we certainly resources for policing and public safety needs to increase with that as well. But at the same time, that we are seeing success as that population grows, but the trends continue to go down. It's very difficult to say on a year-to-year basis, we're going to compare crime based on what happened last year. That's why we focus more on the 5-year average, and the 5-year average is continuing we are below our 5-year average if we look at it in that sense. But you're correct. We do need to make sure that that information is, as the population grows, that we have some sort of comparison to what crime looks like based on per capita in the growth of our city.
Okay. All right, Ms. Ajmira, and we'll come down this way and go around. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, first, let me thank you for your leadership. I appreciate the steady leadership that you have been providing, and I appreciate how you have been very outspoken and advocate for your team, especially with Pretrial Integrity Act. So thank you for leading that effort and successfully in Raleigh.
Thank you.
So this data is great because it shows, it really shows how it's not a year-over-year comparison. We are looking at it more holistically over a long run, and that's great. But when I look at safety, it's more of a perception.
Yes.
And when I talk to someone, how do you feel safe in the city of Charlotte? If you, and the perception about certain parts of our city is truly concerning.
Yes.
I've heard often from those who live in Uptown or those who are going to restaurants or dining here in Uptown, they'll say it hasn't gotten better. And that is certainly concerning to me. When we hear often about streetcar racing, and that's not concentrated in one part. I know that's an issue in Still Creek, University area and other parts, but that is certainly concerning. We have seen shootings on occupied dwellings where children are being put at risk. That is concerning. So when we look at public safety, I think we have to look at this from perception perspective and what we are doing to address some of these other crimes that I just mentioned.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. We battle perception just as much as we battle the reality of what the objective numbers say. And there are things that we can, we're in an era today where news is immediate. As soon as something happens, it's put out there, and it's put out there in full force, and people have more access to information than they ever have. I think that plays into perception as well. But we always say that if people perceive themselves not to be safe, then that's an issue for us that we have to be able to deal with. And whether that's through presence or education, or when we have these really good responses to different things that we've done for street racing, for example, we want to put that information out there. When we seize 50 cars because they took over a street, we want to make sure people know that that's the work that we're doing every single day. And we've had more success in that category than many major cities across the country because they've just not had the legal tools to be able to deal with it. But, we are fortunate that, we've been able to get legislation passed to help us in our efforts, and we're going to continue to do that and advocate to keep us safe, not just through a police perspective, but I think everyone who has a piece of that pie to keep our community safe.
Thank you, Chief Jennings. I certainly appreciate holding people accountable, especially we have been able to do that successfully because of certain legislations that's been passed. This is the first time where I've not seen data on repeat offenders. I know in the past we had data on repeat offenders, especially our youth. Have we seen an improvement since the Pretrial Integrity Act was implemented?
I can tell you off the top of my head that, yes, I believe there's been significant improvement, not just in that, but also in some of the juvenile efforts that we've been putting forth. We usually put that data out at the end of the year briefing, so all of that will be gathered and accumulated and shared with our end of the year statistics.
Yes, so not at December 9th, but January 13th?
January 13th.
Got it.
Yes.
So I would be interested in seeing that as to what is the trend now, and have we made a meaningful difference in that?
Yes. Yes, we'll be able to put all that information together. And, and just so you know, I've had other chiefs from across the state that are just couldn't be more thankful for some of the legislation that's passed that's really helping them in their jobs too, so.
That's great, and I certainly also appreciate how you all have been very proactive in cracking down on some of the arcade game facilities that have really been crime magnets in certain parts of our communities.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Chief, thank you as well for your leadership in the community and for your team. Some innovative things like Stand Up Our Cares team, and I know we're investing and expanding in that. But I was down in Tampa for a National League of Cities, and I sat through a couple of sessions on public safety, and there's cities like Albuquerque, New Mexico is doing some really innovative things around their community safety model that supports their police department, but it sits as a third plank, right, outside of police, fire, and emergency response. But I wonder if I'm not sure if you're aware of some of these community safety models around the country, these multidisciplinary ECHO models. But I wonder if we would benefit from, learning more about them and how they directly impact crime activity and outcomes, and then B, if we believe it's something that could work here in the Queen City. Are you familiar with any of these activities in cities like Albuquerque and Detroit?
Yeah, I'm not thoroughly familiar with them, but I'm good friends with the chief in Albuquerque, and we talk regularly, and we do share ideas, and as with a lot of other major city chiefs. But I can certainly ask him a little bit more about that and listen to what successes they've had as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Having a heat map of some of these troublesome convenience stores and marts, and having a specific approach to trying to mitigate the crime that could potentially occur district by district throughout the city in that regard.
Yes, I mean, I probably get one of those a week where there are complaints about whether it's a convenience store or residence or something, but what we can, that's another factor that we look at, that where we're fortunate it doesn't all fall on the police. We can look at measures that, how difficult it is. I think everyone in this room has dealt with nuisance abatement and how difficult that is. But we just have to continue to keep some of that pressure on and continue to be visible where we can. We were just talking about one this morning where, for weeks we put resources almost around the clock at a single convenience store. And, that's just something we obviously can never sustain and continue to do, but we will, we always try to use whatever resources we can to break some of that cycle, and hopefully it goes away. But we can probably put together something that lists the top convenience stores that we've had calls for service, and I think that'd be some data that we'd certainly be interested in seeing, so.
I'd like to see that data,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll put that together.
And then just lastly, with the conversation around reality versus perception, right? And it's something that we deal with in the Uptown community as well, with people coming out and enjoying themselves. But we're in a state now where you're right, we have access to so much information and so much connectivity, and yet there's so many of our residents who feel like they're isolated and alone.
Yes.
And that just feeds that fear, and that perception as it relates to crime. But I think there's something that we could do, being intentional around addressing perception through a messaging campaign, through.
Appreciate you and the ladies and gentlemen I see to my far right. But I'm going to be a little bit critical. Here and be very direct to you and to the council and to the community. As a policymaker, I clearly understand and respect the data and the research and that you displayed earlier. I can't go in any corporate boardroom or any community meeting and talk about data. Because the folks just won't get it, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling. I think you heard that before. And if I even told you this before, if you don't feel safe, you're not safe. And there's too many people throughout this community that does not feel safe. And I think it's not just a perception. I think in some cases it may be their reality, especially if you live along the Batesville Road corridor. If you dine in uptown Charlotte and someone randomly gets shot and killed, we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards. And so I just hope that when we have this conversation that we certainly have a policy conversation. The data and it's really, really important for the policymakers as we kind of think about how do we move forward. But we just need to really have a real conversation on a wide variety of issues. The issue of nuisance abatement needs to be a real issue, and we need to find some correlation between your department and the city attorney's office in terms of identifying these hot spots. If it takes 2, 3, 4 years, the clock needs to start running on a number of these facilities throughout the city. ABC enforcement needs to be a very heavy presence throughout the city of Charlotte. There may be some stores that are in compliance. There may be others that are not. I think we need to crack down, for the lack of a better word, and making sure where the fortified beer, liquor, and wine are being sold. Are these vape shops really selling the generic marijuana? Are they doing something illegal in these shops? We need to figure that out. You probably heard about the meeting I had 2 weeks ago on Batesville Road. We had about 20 stakeholders. Their words, not mine. No tolerance. No tolerance in terms of some of the behavior that I've witnessed myself, open-ear drug sales along the Batesville Road corridor. We made some major investments from the city's perspective, corridors of opportunity. Private developers have done the same for Third, Chase Bank, TD Banks. They're getting these establishments rocks thrown through the window. Well, you heard the report. We had our conversation. And it is health issues and mental health that we need to really have a real conversation with Mecklenburg County and our health department about, because those are the core components of some of the crime. The homelessness, and I think we dropped the ball because we hadn't even went for it with the Home for All thing, right? That we've spent years literally going back to Tent City, putting a citywide stakeholders group in place, coming up with policy recommendations, and we've kind of sat on that for whatever reason. I think we need to really have a sense of urgency about these issues. Lastly, but not least, we just talked about our legislative agenda. We need more resources from Raleigh for the judicial system, right? And so that should be our top priority, more so than mobility, right? Because no one wants to get, right? That should be it, right? And we need to use our corporate support, the same strategy that we're utilizing for mobility, to get to our legislators in Raleigh who are on the opposite side of the aisle to understand that the largest city in the Carolinas is woefully underfunded when it comes to judicial support. And if we don't talk real about these issues, the stats are one thing. I get it. I understand it. I'm a policymaker. I will interpret it to make decisions. But we need to have some real conversations about have the fortitude to go on Catherine Simmons and forcefully nuisance abate the owner who lives somewhere else. If we don't have the fortitude to make hard decisions as we grow, then, we just got 4 more meetings. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with most of what you said. 90%, but I will tell you, there are certain limits that, like nuisance abatement, there are laws behind that. You can't just say we're going to shut you down. And it's difficult. And a lot of what you said, and I hope the rest of council heard that, is not simply falling on police. We partner with anybody, and we have, and we will, and we'll continue to do that. Even things that might be out of our purview, but we'll partner with anybody that will, if the ultimate goal is safety in our community, then sign us up.
Well, I know you're partnering significantly with the DA's office. I mean, we've had this conversation before.
Absolutely.
So I know you guys are solid from a institutional perspective. From a policy perspective, the policymakers,
Yes.
we're fragmented from my perspective,
Yes.
right? And there doesn't seem to be a cohesive approach of working to get the type of legislation we need out of Raleigh to do things that we have to do, getting more court support, working with our agencies like Atrium and Novant and others around the issues of mental health. Now, they're doing some things, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem to be a cohesive fit with other community partners where the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and there's some coordination beyond what we're trying to do. So,
And I'll always continue to fight for District Attorney Spencer Merriweather. I don't know how he can, with the resources they provide him, he's doing the best he can, so.
But that's the rub, right? And so I get it, but there's more that we can do, and it's just other than, you heard from the Mayor Pro Tem as well as Councilman Ashmeyer. There's a perception problem that we're fighting each and every day, notwithstanding the data. And, that perception sometimes is, again, people's reality because they're living it, experiencing it each and every day throughout the city. Thank you.
Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I appreciate you and your officers, and I hope they understand. I'm 100% in support. I wanted to mention, I don't know if you know, that Kelly Weeks, the widow of the marshal who was killed on April 29th, spoke at Rotary last week.
Yes.
And she spoke in very moving terms about how CMPD officers rushed to the scene and into harm's way. I recommend it. You can find it on their website.
Yes.
I would say, as far as the feeling of safety is concerned, I lived in New York during a very bad time in the city. It was famous for having a high crime rate. If you lived there, you kind of knew that if you went to certain places at certain times, you weren't worried. You could ride the subways, you could travel, but you did not go into Central Park. You didn't ride the subway at night. So as long as you played by those rules, you were safe. What I'm hearing about uptown Charlotte is people don't feel that way. And I've heard that they don't see a police presence, and they are exposed to either behaviors or to attacks on their person, verbal or whatever, but they don't feel that there is a kind of a safe presence there at a time and a place where there really should be. So I just use that parallel. You can't be everywhere all the time, but if you can't be uptown in the evening and restaurants are closing early, it's a bad situation. And I've had a number of business owners tell me about that. The one other thing I wanted to mention was I had 2 calls in the last couple of months from people who had been in car accidents and had called CMPD and waited for an hour or more, and no one came. So I'm curious to know what the latest is in terms of response times, or whether we're having to prioritize in such a way that basically nobody goes. One of them, by the way, was a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives. So that's not a good look for us. I just offer that to you. And I don't really have any questions. I appreciate the work you do and wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I will tell you, our civilian crash investigators, they do roll out next week, I think. They're finishing up their training, but that's 15 investigators that will do nothing but property damage, vehicle accidents. So hopefully that'll help with some of that response time. But yeah, if they left after an hour, an officer probably did respond, but an hour for a traffic accident, that's, unfortunately, that's kind of where we are now. So
is that a manpower shortage, or are we just not recognizing traffic accidents as? I mean, people want to see the police for the report and so on.
Certainly.
The insurance, I realize it's not a safety issue at that point, but
Yeah.
Are we just not promising anybody that they can expect to see a CMP officer at the scene of an accident when there's no injury?
No, we'll respond to accidents. Now, what I will tell you is, you ask if it's a manpower shortage. I think it's more of a call volume issue that we continue to increase our call volume, and as we continue to up our staffing and fill some of these vacancies and get the trainees out and to where they're radio response officers, then we'll hopefully see better response times on that. But at the same time, I look at our dashboard on a regular basis, and there are literally times when every single officer in patrol is assigned to a car or to a call, and they have to get off of that call to go. And if they get off of that call and there's another higher priority call that's higher than an accident, then that will push that accident call back a little bit. So, yeah, it's certainly an issue. I'm not going to hide behind that and say that, we're responding well to those, but at the same time, our officers are prioritizing those calls and getting out there as soon as they can.
We have talked about response times before. It might be helpful to get an update on what the data look like.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, I just say that, particularly Mr. Graham's comments, I wholeheartedly support that approach. I think that is the way he articulated prioritization, amongst other things for this topic, about getting other resources to the table. I think that's an absolute no-brainer, something we should get behind. I'll also say I'll applaud you, Mr. Manager, for putting this series in front of us, right? We've talked about it for a long time. We kind of get one-way presentations a lot of times. And the way you've articulated to me is this is our opportunity to kind of help shape what the next meeting and then the next meeting look like based on what we want to see. So I think we have the right foundation to move forward. I would tweak what I heard from Mr. Graham just slightly in the exploration for these next couple sessions, where I don't necessarily know the data is the data and we jump over it and we just move on to perception and policy. Any of us who work in data know there's 1,000 ways we can slice and dice and present things. And sometimes it's presented to us in rose-colored glasses. Sometimes it's presented in a way that sheds the best light on it. And what I think we need to do is, like you've suggested offline, is we work offline to request what specifically we want to see, how we want to see breakdowns in property crimes, violent crimes, repeat offenders, juvenile crime, how we can see the internal views of morale, recruitment, and retention without any kind of skewing it one way or another. And it may take a couple iterations to get there. But I think my belief is if we can get to the real crux of the data, there may be a scenario where it isn't just perception is different than data and somehow we've got a correct perception. I think that we might have to face some hard truths once we get that and be willing to go to the community and say, see, here it is. This aligns more with what you're feeling in this specific angle, but we can't be unwilling to go down that path because it puts a bad light on where we're going. So I just think that's such a critical part of the exercise. For so long, across all topics, we kind of present things in its best absolute light. But I think those of us, especially district reps who are out there fielding calls and solving issues and talking to neighbors and those who are talking to people in the department, I mean, there's some point where you got to scratch your head and say, anecdotally, how come this is so different than the way it's presented to me every time? So I applaud you for doing this, and I'll work with you offline, as I encourage everyone to really not jump over the data part and ask some questions.
Watlington?
Thank you. I've got a few questions that are database that I think will drive some of the program evaluation work, so I can share this with you offline, but I agree with much of what's been said. I will say, though, that a lot of it is not new, right? This is the same conversation we've been having for some time, and I would challenge us to really think about how do we approach this outside of a government lens, because for me, you can't legislate people's hearts, right? And we've got a cultural issue across the nation, period. When we think about what we consume on a daily basis, what our youth in particular, who we know show up disproportionately as offenders, we know that there is something markedly different about what we see in and out of every day, whether it's social media, whether it's through music, whether it's through movies, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got to think about how do we impact the economics of media? How do we think about partnering with these media corporations and with our federal government entities to think about how we incentivize or how we deter certain behaviors when it comes to what we're broadcasting over the airways? That's a small piece of it, but again, much of it has already been discussed, but I think ultimately we're going to be chasing our tails if we think that we're going to solve what's going on inside of people's hearts and homes from this dais. I think we're missing a fundamental human-centered approach to that. Yes, we have partnerships with nonprofits and with our faith-based community, but there is something much deeper going on in our world today, and we've got to be cognizant of that if we actually want to make some headway. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Brown?
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Mayor. And Chief, thank you so much for your hard work. I've watched the 11 months that I've been in office, and to you wonderful folks behind me, thank you for everything that you do every day. I could not be a police officer. I can't be anyway because of my history, but I would have no desire. Not because I don't like what you do and how you do it, but the world that we live in. I have to piggyback off of Dr. Wallaton and where I come from and family members that I see every day that choose to make the wrong decision. Even after I share my life story, after they know they fell off the family tree, all of that is cultural for me and it's deep for me. When I think about my district, West Boulevard, Four Corners, they've been working on it forever. I'll even get out the car because I know some of those folks.
Yeah.
This is real life stuff. Why are you standing on the corner? What can we do to make it better for you? You've been standing on the corner for years. There are gunshots, there are memorials that are on each corner. At the store, somebody was murdered. I know these people. I grew up with them, or I grew up with their parents or their family members. When you talk about District 3, you say Woodline, disaster, Woodline Road, Nation Ford Road. I'm talking about some of the areas you and your staff have to deal with. Wilkinson Boulevard, Ashley Road, of course the 4 Points on West Boulevard. Talk to those folks all the time, every time I go to the store, I walk to the store. Yes, the nuisance and abatement order, I get it. But I also would like to see, and this is for us, like Dr. Wallaton said, we are simply not going to be able to solve what's in a person's heart, what their will is to do. I know that the call volume has went up. I was in Steel Creek, there was an accident, and I just stopped because that's just who I am. And maybe it was unsafe, but it was a young person. They had been driving under the influence about 3 weeks ago, and they ran off the embankment. And it took the officers a while to get there, but when I was talking with them on the phone, 911 placed me on hold. That's not CMPD. I was placed on hold. I'm telling you, I made the call. And we were standing there with some other civilians. They stopped, residents in Steel Creek on the corner of the mall, the premium outlet. The young man had been drinking, so once your officers got there, they did what they did. But we were put in a category where we were rated on the seriousness of what was going on. I know this because I was out there.
Yes.
And so I get it. The young man was talking. He was alert. They asked me all these questions. So maybe somebody on the other side of the town was maybe in a bad accident where they're about to die. So then we do have to allocate the priority of the call and where it needs to go. I would like to see, this is me, I don't think you need to deal with the animal shelter. I don't know what that looks like or how we would get you out from under that. You guys have so much to deal with. In the 11 months that I've been sitting here, the seriousness of Woodline, West Boulevard, Nation Ford Road, all these areas that are mine, that I grew up in, the airport, you don't have time to create a traffic stop. I know that every single night on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, not Sunday. From Longhorn on 160, those young folks, they line up. They were so concerned about people being unhoused on the corner where Premium Outlet is, where people can see them, so what? The likelihood of an unsheltered person killing me versus somebody coming out of Longhorn speeding at 200 miles an hour in those muscle cars, it could be your family, my family, or any of our families sitting at this dais. So why I do care about unhoused population, there was a priority put there, and that area has been cleaned up. Yet those young folks still doing donuts on 160, where they can ultimately kill any of us. Because if you get hit, that impact, there's no way we're gonna walk away. And if we do, it's something greater than God's grace. Partnership, very important. Faith-based organization. For me, I know in some areas, because I travel the world dealing with justice, impacted individuals that have backgrounds like me, that have been through this stuff, when you put people in front of them that look like them, that been through what they've been through, and you reimagine what a community could look like, that is what continues to happen. We reimagine what a community can look like. And some of these things CMPD wouldn't have to deal with, because to me, West Boulevard is just as important as our city center partners. I love them. I understand the economic driver may be downtown Charlotte and not on the corner of West Boulevard, but it could be. If we invest the proper way, it's a corridor of opportunity. And so, once again, you guys can't do everything, and I don't expect for you to do everything. You work very hard, long hours. The perception over reality is just that. Some folks feel like they're down on their luck, and they're going to continue to do the same thing because they feel like, I have a background. If I go out, I got to check the box. And if I'm checking the box, I'm only going to be able to get $7.50 to $12 an hour. That's not going to take care of anybody's family. I'm an exception to the rule. That exception don't happen often. Yeah. It just doesn't. That's the real world where I come from. And so when we put it in front of what can we do and how can we do it better, we have to continue to organize and mobilize and let our nonprofit organizations come in, step up. And again, I'm animal shelter. I don't think you should have to deal with the four-legged, beautiful creature animals that are running around here. You have two-legged creatures that you got to deal with every single day. And some of them are definitely more violent than the animals. So while I've listened to all of my colleagues and say what perception is, for me, yes, I have some concerns. I have some challenges about where do I feel safe at. But no city diverts preferential treatment versus the other. So I think on a blanket statement, if we could all come together and see, we need to allocate our funding equally across the city, and that's not going to happen. It hasn't happened for so long. That's why the 4 points at West Boulevard look the way they look and continue to look the way they look. I know there's some work being put in there, but it needs to be a little bit more work. West Boulevard, Woodline, I get all the emails, all the phone calls, Nationport Walk, Wilkinson, these areas that I'm really concerned about. And I know some of these folks because I've lived the lifestyle that they live. So again, I commend you. Yeah, there's more to do. There's always more to do. But CMPD just simply cannot do it by themselves. And I know because I called 911 and I was placed on hold. When your officers got there, it was two of them. They took over, they did what they do. But at the end of the day, we have really got to dig deeper. And it may not even come, like Dr. Watson said, from this dais. So I commend you on the work that you're doing. There's always more that we can do. And I also want to put the same emphasis we're putting on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councilwoman Brown, for your passion. Thank you. And thank you, Chief, for the work that you do. I can see the pride in your eyes when you talk about your officers. So thank you guys also. Thank you. I had the pleasure of seeing some officers at the University Safety Summit on November 7th, so they do a great job, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Councilwoman Brown talked about 911 being placed on hold. I can remember meeting with the city manager, maybe in 2020, talking about 911 being placed on hold when there was a call. And I also called 911 recently for something in the road or something, and I hung I hung up because by the time they would have answered, I was past it, and it just was kind of pointless. But they called back like 10 minutes later. Mm-hmm. So there's still that issue. So is that a staffing issue? And is that a staffing issue? And is there anything, any priority? Is there anything we can do as a council to improve that statistic?
Yeah, and one, council did approve additional 911 operators or communication operators last year, I believe it was. So those positions were filled, but however, attrition when it comes to telecommunications is pretty high. So we're constantly hiring and constantly losing people and filling those positions back. We are looking at we have looked at other things to try and assist, such as part-time 911 answering people, just answering 911 and not dispatching, and some of that has come into play as well. But we still have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to. We did something with the 911 system to where there's an automatic answer. There's an answer to it, and I don't know if that's where we're saying we're being put on hold, but where it's answered by an automated system that will also, if you don't get picked up within a certain amount of time, it goes from the police telecommunicators over to fire communications. And then if it doesn't get picked up in a certain amount of time, it then rolls over to medic communications. So obviously the police have most of the communicators in the office working, but we try to make sure that instead of just, if the police don't, telecommunicators don't answer, then it rolls directly over and it tells people not to hang up, that it's going over to another system. So we have some work to do there. I know that that is difficult, but a lot of times when we have peak moments in 911 calls, you might have a traffic accident on the interstate and you might get 50 calls that come in, and that backs up the system as well. So I've been looking at some things also, can we use technology to help get these calls answered and dispatched? For example, I'm not saying we're doing this, so I'm just don't go saying we're doing it. But like AI, for example, can we get AI to answer it and dispatch? That technology is out there and available, but particularly for calls where somebody just needs an officer out there, and we can avoid having to have a real person take that specific call. But I think there's some options to look at. We're not going to, it's difficult to solve. It's again, we get over 1 million calls in the dispatch center every year, and that's a challenge. Always going to be a challenge.
Okay, and we can talk offline because I know we have constituents waiting downstairs. So
Certainly.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And, recognizing the time, I guess I'll echo, and not really, a lot has been said, so I don't want to, repeat anything. First, thank you, Chief, for your service to our community, for your commitment. I think earlier this year, our city, after a long period of time, we humanized our officers again because of a desperate tragedy that we had to look at, our public servants for public safety through a new lens. And for the first time through something so tragic, I saw people, different ideological placing, start to look at, like I said, our public servants from a human perspective. And so I feel like, that put a new light on some of these conversations that we're having, right? Some people now realize some of the dangers that the public servants put themselves in, what ways they put themselves in order to keep us safe. I want to ask you a few questions. How many precincts do you have, Chief?
There are 13 divisions within Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department.
So those each have a captain, right?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of the division among, like, the districts? Like, I know for example, for me, I see one of my captains who I know and correspond with, and it's just a rock star sitting back there. 3 for my district, right, that I get to correspond with and go do ride-alongs with. Are we aware of, like, which ones correspond with which district?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
So like, we have 7 districts. So what you hear, in essence, from us, right? I know that we have to commit to overall policy, but what you hear in each one of our passions is the people who contact us, right? With their
Certainly.
perception, with the information. For an example, I have an ongoing conversation with actually one of the captains that are here for something that is specific to the district that may or may not involve my colleagues, but it may impact how we look at overall policy that may affect your decision-making for, the entirety of CMPD, right?
Yeah, and certainly, our boundaries are different from what your boundaries are with council and responsibilities, but I've always, encouraged, one, the captains should know who that council member is that's overseeing their districts. And I think that council members should know who their captains are and have that dialogue that you're talking about, because at the end of the day, if you send me something, I'm getting in touch with the captain and asking for a response. So, so you can cut out the middleman. I'm usually the middleman in that, but you can cut me out. But I encourage that, and it saves a lot of time. And if you have those relationships, it can also get you some of the attention that you want, that we can help prioritize things that are prioritized on your agendas too, so.
Yeah, and so, like I said, what you're hearing specifically, like I can't speak to the passion of West Charlotte, right? Because I'm not there on a day-to-day basis. I'm not interacting with the community members, but those are things that, are going to impact how that particular representative brings forth that policy. For East Charlotte, Mayor Pro Tem and I, we share an area of emphasis that we've been hearing a lot from lately, the Milton Road, Plaza, Eastway area. And we have ongoing conversations about that. And I'm really hoping that with the help of our staff and, our very capable, captains and even our major who's sitting over there, I mean, that we can continue to, ideate around what's possible for that particular area. But I guess I'll end with this. Some of the data, right, that governs some of our decision-making, it's going to be important for us to have it. I can say in abstract that I feel something for East Charlotte, right? Or that people are bringing to my attention something in, specifically for East Charlotte. But that data, from an overall perspective, it'll help us disseminate that information. But it doesn't say that we're not making strides. It doesn't say that I don't believe that we're making strides. It's just, I believe from a public safety perspective, there's always going to be things to do, right? I don't feel like that there's a zero-sum game and that at some point we'll never have crime, we'll never have issues, but I look forward to continuing to work with you. I am proud of the East Charlotte, leaders that I get to interact with, and that's all I get to say.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you. And I want to say thank you to the council. I know that this was something that, we said we ought to get to the audience, and we often do that. But I think this was one of the most valuable discussions because we have 4 different opportunities to have this. And this, I think, leads us into a great foundation. You've heard what people want and see and communicate to the leaders here. And thank you all for being here. I haven't seen you since this morning, but I guess they let you go home at night sometime. But I want to say, Chief, we're proud of our officers. We're proud of the work that you do. And I think that what this council has said is that we, as a council, care deeply about the city and what we can do to support you. So thank you. Now we will go downstairs, and we will have a council meeting. But I would just say that if we had meetings like this that were as I think, open and heartfelt, we'd be in a lot better position on a number of our policy issues. So let's figure out how to make this work for all of us. Let's go downstairs and have some speakers.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
choosing to sit. I hope that you've met someone new in the audience that you sat by and learned something new about our community. We had a very long discussion with our police chief, and I think it was one that was great value to us. And so if you'll forgive us for trying to create that ability for us all to begin to think about how our city can become more safe, I really want to say thank you for doing this. So I'm now going to call the Charlotte City Council business meeting to order. And we'll go ahead and start with our introductions. We'll start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, and I'm honored to represent District 4.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Dante Anderson, Mayor Pro Tem, District 1.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Barb Carter, 6.
All right.
Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you. We begin our meeting with a thoughtful moment, and today we've asked our Mayor Pro Tem, Dante Anderson, to give us a way to lead tonight, beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I was thinking about this week being such a special week for family members to come together and to celebrate connectivity with your loved ones and your friends, and all the good time that we spend together during the Thanksgiving week. And so this evening, I'd like to share a Thanksgiving Day prayer of gratitude that was initially shared to the world by President John F. Kennedy. Let us therefore proclaim our gratitude to Providence for manifold blessings. Let us be humbly thankful for inherited ideals, and let us resolve to share those blessings and those ideals with our fellow human beings throughout the world. On that day, let us gather in sanctuaries dedicated to worship and in homes blessed by family affection to express our gratitude for the glorious gifts of God. And let us earnestly and humbly pray that God will continue to guide and sustain us in the great unfinished task of achieving peace, justice, understanding among all men and nations, and of ending misery and suffering wherever it exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, please join us, if you would like to, for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move into our business meeting agenda items, I want to take a moment to read into the official record the result of our recent annual evaluations for positions of the Charlotte City Clerk and Charlotte City Manager. For the City Clerk, we will include a 2% base salary increase, and for the City Manager, we will include a 5% base manager salary increase. Both of these payments are effective July 1, 2024. I want to say thank you to all of the people that work in our community to make it better, and especially those that have to work in times like this at nighttime, in the way that we have to do these meetings, and their guidance for us as we continue to build a great city of Charlotte. So with that, we'll now go ahead and I want to recognize Councilwoman Victoria Watlington to recognize the celebration that we're going to have. I think one that we're all interested in.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas the month of November welcomes in both a time of Thanksgiving and a season for sharing our resources and our freedoms to worship, work, and live as independently as possible, and whereas some members of our community cannot find adequate employment or a place to live for a variety of reasons, both simple and complex. And whereas there are efforts to bring homeless children and adults out of the shadows of our abundance to address the diverse needs among them, as well as to correct systemic conditions that have led to their poverty and homelessness. And whereas our current economic challenges call for greater awareness and guidance to address needs among all of our neighbors. And whereas the Homeless Services Network of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, its member organizations, and its public partners in the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County desire to dispel myths and overcome stereotypes of homelessness and to provide opportunities for all of our citizens to learn more about the plight, the hope, and the achievements of homeless neighbors of our community and to welcome them, we commit to work together to overcome systemic causes of homelessness. Now, therefore, Vi Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, and George Dunlap, Chair of the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2024 as Homeless Awareness Month in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County and urge all of our citizens to honor this observance. I'd like to recognize Harper Ellis, Vice Chair of the Homeless Services Network of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and Randall Hitt of Roof Above to accept this proclamation.
Thank you very much for the work that you do. We are going to have a public forum where we have people that call the city clerk because they want to petition something from the city council. I want to recognize that when we are doing this and we're having this work done, that we actually want to ask people to be what I would call, or my mom would say, mannerable. You know, we do not want disruptions, and we do not want people to be against or speak against each other, because what you're doing is speaking to us as a council. So I think that I'd like to say if the speakers has disruptions, then we will ask you to stop. And if it goes and continues, we will ask you to leave the meeting chamber. I will not be asking you. That young man with the blue uniform over there and the stripes, gray stripes, will help us if we have any need for that. So thank you very much for that, if we can all do this work together. We also have a policy where we have 15 speakers, and I believe today we are up to 15. So I'm going to begin with our first speaker, and then the second person. We have two podiums, so please come down with two podiums. The first one is Manish Damami, and the second speaker is Tawana Brooks. Tawana Brooks.
Each speaker gets 2 minutes.
And each speaker gets 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I should have said that. So as you're thinking about what you're going to say, 2 minutes, okay?
Go behind you.
Go to the podium and the microphone so that everybody can hear it, and it'll be recorded in the city's minutes.
Mayor, the accommodations for people,
She's coming. She's coming over.
people that may need the accommodations. The accommodations.
Yes, if you need an accommodation or need any special help to come to the mic, we have one upstairs and we have one downstairs. Just so, thank you, Ms. Brown, for reminding me of that. All right, so Mr. Damani, is that correct?
Ma'am.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Madam Mayor, council members, I appreciate you allowing me to come talk with you tonight. Going to be getting some handouts, but basically this is about a water main break that occurred on August 28th at my neighbor's yard at 2 o'clock in the morning. Basically, I'd moved into my house 6 months prior, and hundreds of gallons of water poured out of this water main break a couple feet from the curb, leaving a 12-foot wide hole and about 10 foot deep. And all that water flooded from my neighbor's yard into his house, towards his garage, and he has an elevated garage that then poured down into the side of my yard, created 4-foot trenches in the side of the yard. All that water then flooded to my backyard. I just put a brand new pool in, and the Pebble Tech that had been applied the day before has to cure for several weeks with clean water. No water had been applied just as of yet, but my neighbor texted me at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I found over 36,000 gallons of dirt, debris, flooding the entire pool, the patio area, and basically destroyed everything. So later on that morning, at 7 in the morning, the pool company who had just come by to inspect and see what was going on had to pull everything out, reapply Pebble Tech, clean the entire patio area, and basically had to truck water in because the entire street had to have its water shut down. Between that, the damage to the landscaping, the water also flooded the street in front of my house, created a massive sinkhole. That then had to get repaired by the city. If you add up all the costs all in general, it was $22,331.24. Had talked with the city as well, and they basically said through many emails that this was basically a natural disaster and they're not willing to cover anything.
Thank you very much. My understanding is that we are aware of this and that there is a review of it, and that we would have, what we're trying to do is determine what we legally would have to do to make this work. So I expect you'll be hearing more from the city as we go ahead, and thank you so much for sharing that information.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And get it ready before the summer, right? So,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
okay. Ms. Brooks?
Good afternoon, or good evening, I'm sorry. I live in Uptown in the Catalyst Apartments, right across from Bearden Park. There has been a lot of crime in that area, as you all know. This summer, there was a fight in July. There was also a shooting right in front of the 7-Eleven on 925. And then on 11/2, someone was actually killed right outside of the park. So we were told that, there would be more police presence. Since all of that has happened, the police presence has been sporadic at best. We haven't seen very much difference since all of these events have happened. We need better lighting in the park. We need to make sure that the police are consistently patrolling that area, especially after the park closes. There's a lot of loitering in the park, especially after midnight when the park is closed. There's a lot of homelessness where people are actually sleeping in the park. And I believe in the information center building that is right in the park as well. And I just wanted to ask the council, what changes are you guys, I heard you say that you guys were talking to the police chief tonight about the crime, and I wanted to know what changes that you have for that area going forward.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brooke. We have had several comments and requests for the issues that you've described very adequately, more than adequately, in terms of how the park has become something that has been considered more negative, especially for the many residents in the Catalyst and across the street and all of that. We are very much aware of it, and I don't have an answer for you directly, but we will have someone work with you for communication of what we are going to do. And as I say, we're quite aware of the issues that the park is supposed to be a wonderful place, but it has not proven itself to do that or be that in the last several months. So thank you very much for telling us about it, and we are continuing to work on it.
Thank you. Just one more comment I wanted to make. If at all possible, with New Year's coming up, I know you guys probably have a plan in place, but what I've noticed is, especially on the weekends, Thursday through Sunday, there's really not any police presence. There are people that are drag racing up and down Church Street late at night. I myself, when the shooting happened, we called 911. It took an hour for someone to even reach back out to speak with us about what had happened. So I just asked the council, I actually beg you, to please just really take that into consideration as for our safety, the people who live uptown, because we love living uptown, but we just want it to be safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Heath to get the additional information from you, Ms. Brooks, so that we can follow up. So if you would meet with him right over there. We appreciate you coming down and expressing this for us.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jay Walker and Vera Faulkner. Mr. Walker and Ms. Faulkner. So I see 4 people that are coming down. So we'll start out with Mr. Walker and Ms. Faulkner, followed by, this is Ms. Murphy, Kate Murphy will be next, and then Martha Vanessa. Is that our next, does that make the 4th? Thank you, all right. Why don't we go ahead and begin with Mr. Walker?
Yes, hello, council members. Happy holidays. Actually, it's not happy holidays for me. I'm here with my supporters. We have a racial situation in Charlotte, Grove Park area, and I'm not happy here because the holidays, because my wife is not here, Yvonne Walker, because she just can't take this racist Richard Uri. It's a racist person live across the street in District Council 5. I was told not to call the person's name because I should be polite and cordial, but her initials is Eminem. Okay, I used to like M&Ms. I don't like M&Ms anymore. This situation, the police and the community is enabling this white racist supremacist across the street from me, right across the street. And there's been 2 newspaper articles about it. And still, we're not getting any help. We moved here over 10 years ago from New York, and we moved here. We retired, we're over 70, seniors. This is our dream home, supposed to be, and we moved into Grove Park area. In New York, I lived in mostly black neighborhoods. This is my first time living in a mixed neighborhood, even though he says this is still a white neighborhood, and we're gonna run you, if I can curse here, I don't know.
That's not.
Niggas is not a curse word.
Yeah,
A niggas is a curse word?
no.
Okay, well, he says, we're gonna run
Your
you.
2 minutes are up, though. I understand that. We'll go to Ms. Faulkner next.
Can they see? Can Ms. Faulkner see?
Yes.
No,
Could she
this
see
is,
their time?
no, you can't, because we have rules, and I know that it's difficult sometimes when you're, all right, we will not, I'm just explaining that we have rules, and we follow those rules, and if we begin to think about it differently,
The rules at
then
3,
it becomes
the
something.
rules at 6:30, you're gonna start, you didn't start till 7:15.
But we,
You didn't start till
the
7:15.
time that we were late does not impact the time that we have. We have, as I said, we have 15 speakers with 2 minutes.
What you-
We haven't started the time with Ms. Faulkner, so we will begin with you, Ms. Faulkner.
Hello, I'm a previous neighbor in Grove Park, and towards the beginning of 2024, my roommate and I witnessed Rick Uri's racial actions towards the Walkers, infringing on privacy, verbal harassment, dishonesty, creating an environment of fear, constant surveillance, repeatedly calling 911 while the Walkers are existing on their own property. The list is endless. These acts of racism have been well known for a long time. Not only are police involved and aware, but communities and council members too. Numerous newspapers have reported on it, call to actions have been made, and potlucks and rallies have been held, yet nothing has changed. Instead, Jay is told to lay low while Uri continues his harassment unchecked. This has been happening for years now, and even longer before Jay. No one has told Uri to take down his signs or held him accountable. Since 2020, Mr. Uri has called the police on the Walkers 66 times. From a February 16th call Queen City Nerve obtained from 911 conversations in which Uri tells the dispatcher, "I'm a cancer survivor, I'm weak, and if I have to shoot him, I'm going to do it. You need to get somebody out here quickly because I'm going to." When asked if he had a firearm, Yuri replied, "Yes, ma'am, and I will use it. He has threatened me, he's assaulted me, I'm tired of it, it's in my waistband." This man is a clear threat to the walkers and anyone around him. Who knew defending yourself to Mr. Yuri would mean a call to the police? He doesn't stop at this. He takes hundreds of pictures daily, not only of the walkers, but anyone who passes, including women and children. There's absolutely no reason for this disgusting behavior. This is not a harmless neighborhood dispute. Mr. Yuri's criminal record speaks for itself. Assault on a female, assault with a deadly weapon, driving while impaired, reckless driving to endanger, shooting in city limits, and simple assault, dating all the way back to 1987. How is he still not being questioned? Why has it taken all this just to get someone to possibly listen? There should be no excuse for this racist. When members of this community have been facing it for years, where are the people called to protect? Where is the action, and why is this being treated like it's nothing? In the QC Nerve article, Mr. Walker says, "It's almost like if your neighbor's house is on fire and you just ignore it. How could you do that? I couldn't do that. I'm not saying to run into a burning building, but you do something."
Thank you very much
They
for your
just left
comments.
us.
Our next speakers are Kate Murphy and Martha Vanessa.
My name is Reverend Murphy. I'm the pastor of the Grove Presbyterian Church in the Grove Park neighborhood. And I want to continue to speak about the harassment that the Walker family has been enduring for more than 5 years. Truly, the values of a community are not in what it says, but in what it tolerates. And the Walkers have been living in hell for 5 years, and everyone has just been tolerating it. The police and the criminal justice system have been weaponized against them, and leaders shrug their shoulders and say, "There's nothing we can do. You'll just have to endure it until you can't anymore." Charlotte brands itself on being a city of the New South, but right now what's happening to the Walkers feels a lot like the Old South. Dr. Jamar Tisby says sometimes justice requires taking a side. We as a community need leaders who will take a side and go to Mr. Yuri and say, this kind of behavior is unacceptable in Charlotte, North Carolina in the year 2024. And the fact that that conversation isn't happening is speaking volumes, not just to Mr. Yuri, but others like him in the community who are learning that they can harass and weaponize the police against their Black neighbors and no one will do anything. We need your help to get involved and to stand with the Walkers and let Mr. Yuri know that he cannot harass him in this way and go without experiencing any consequences. Mr. Walker is telling me that he thinks about Medgar Evans getting shot on his way home every night, that he looks in the bushes and wonders who's going to be waiting for him with a gun there. How is this going to end? He needs to be able to live in peace in his house without fearing for his life, feeling like he can't even sit on his front yard. Please intervene. Let Mr. Yuri know that this behavior is unacceptable, and Mr. Walker has a right to live here in peace.
All right. Martha Vanessa.
Don't sit up there and clap when you have the power to do something against it.
You don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna clap if I want to, because I agree with her.
Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown. Just start.
All right, let's go ahead. We're ready for you, Ms. Vanessa.
Other situations have escalated. Last month in Minneapolis, Mr. Davis Maturi was shot by his white neighbor after he and his wife complained 19 times about the racist harassment. The neighbor was never arrested. After the attack, the senator said that the police refusing to arrest on basis of avoiding conflict is in contrast to other situations in which Black men have been killed. Mr. Maturi recovered in the hospitals from his injuries. The police chief himself said, "We failed this victim 100%. And to that victim, I say, I'm sorry this happened to you." Apologies after ignoring a situation or waiting until it escalates means nothing. Here in Grove Park, Mr. Walker has made several complaints and has been told Rick's actions are not criminal. In 2023, NC passed the Hate Crime Prevention Act, stating that officers had to be trained to identify, respond, and report hate crimes. CMPD has a crime prevention unit that states that the best way to stop violence is prevention, but the Walkers have not seen preventative measures. Mr. Walker has not been contacted at any recent time about the harassment. This year, the resource officer for Grove Park has been contacted by neighbors with no response. Racism is violent, racist threats are violent, racist institutions, practices, and systems are violent. Black homeowners in Charlotte have a history of being ignored and displaced and not treated with respect. In 2021, our mayor apologized for the role of the city council in 1958 in voting for an urban renewal program. That program displaced and destroyed Brooklyn, a Black neighborhood in Uptown. Our mayor said that the current council has a commitment to equity, social justice, and our city's role to address systemic racism. If you can't address a white supremacist in a neighborhood on a local level, I damn sure don't believe they will ever be addressed on a systemic level. The district council member of the Grove Park neighborhood was contacted about the issue and stated that they're exploring additional resources. These resources have not yet been presented to the walkers. They also stated that previous efforts, including CMPD and community liaison involvement, have not yet resolved the matter. The only previous community efforts from CMPD was in 2021, and there has not been follow-up. It resulted in officers telling Mr. Walker that Rick's actions are confrontational but not criminal. If the shooting of Mr. Maturi was 100% a police failure, it indicates a lack of preventative action. There was no follow-up with Mr. J and Ms. Yvonne about what they have experienced since then, despite 911 calls.
Ms. Vanessa, thank you for the comments.
Don't wait for this to escalate. It can escalate. It's gonna escalate if you wait.
Mr. Walker, would you come down and, Mr. Heath, would you follow up with him? I have to say that we have heard a number of people that have intervened in this way, and I'm just not quite sure. So we're going to work on this, and it's going to take some time. So let's go ahead with our next speaker, which is Nikki Thomas, followed by John Irwin. Ms. Thomas.
Hi, I'm Nikki Thomas. I live in Ravenwood, and I'm a neighbor of Jay and Yvonne Walker, and I wanted to share my perspective on the response or lack thereof from our neighborhood. So I've lived in the neighborhood for 6.5 years. I drive past the Walker's house probably 5 or more times a week, but I'd never spoken to them. I noticed when the handmade cardboard signs went up in the Walker's yard, then signs went up across the street in Mr. Urie's yard, and I did nothing. I kept driving by. When Mr. Urie erected the large lighted signs, I discussed it with friends, but I still didn't do anything. Unfortunately, my response was not that much different than the response of most of the residents in Grove Park and Ravenwood. When I recognized the Walker's front yard in an Instagram post raising money to purchase security cameras for an elderly couple being racially harassed by their neighbor, I went to their next event, a potluck last June where I met Jay and Yvonne. It took the outreach efforts of university students to get me to act, and it took seeing the situation on social media for me to pay attention to someone who lived out in the street. My reasons for not reaching out are varied, but I know a big part was fear. Fear that I might offend them by knocking on their door, fear that I would be meddling, fear that without the whole story I should mind my own business. My fear of shame, of embarrassment, kept me disconnected from my community. I think there's another kind of fear at play right now in our neighborhood as well, and that's fear of Rick Urie. We live in a neighborhood that does a lot to build community. We have events throughout the year. We live in the kind of neighborhood where they would say that we would rally behind our neighbors to put a stop to harassment and racism that the Walkers deal with on a daily basis. But the Walkers' neighbors are afraid that if they stand up for Jay and Yvonne, Mr. Urie's wrath will turn to them next. There are enough stories about Mr. Urie's past actions and behavior, endless police calls, an aggressive dog, that we're justified in our fear. We would be remiss not to be afraid of someone who takes photographs of our children, someone who's taken photographs of Jay on his trips to the grocery store. And this fear is all the more supported by the facts of Mr. Urie's history. There was an info session at the home on the other side of the neighborhood. The attendance of our residents at that event was 2 to 3 times more than the events in Jay's front yard. That front yard's directly across the street.
Your time is up. Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Irwin. John Irwin.
Members of the council, I'm here to speak on behalf of Mr. Jay Walker and Mrs. Yvonne Walker. As a concerned citizen of the city and an East Charlotte community member, I find that the unimpeded harassment and intimidation of the Walkers face sets a dangerous precedent for the people who work and live in the area. Mr. Rick Urie's behavior is disturbing to basically every decent person in the area. He scares his other neighbors, harasses the neighborhood dog walkers, and takes pictures of children and adults doing nothing more than just going about their day. The Walkers have had to contend with this behavior personally, taking the brunt of it for years. Imagine working hard to build your dream life and home, and in your twilight years not being able to enjoy it because of a petty, racist, antagonistic little man. This situation has put so much stress on the Walkers, keeping them from enjoying their home and exacerbating their health concerns. This has also resulted in Mr. J being falsely accused of criminal acts, when it is in fact Mr. Urie who is the criminal, and that's on record. Everyone who has ran across Rick can attest that he is a foul person. We are here today asking that the council and the city help the Walkers in some way. Providing resources, making CMPD and their community liaisons do their job, censor Mr. Uri in some way. One look at his property and you just know that he is violating some city or county ordinances. Something needs to be done to let him know that his behavior and treatment of the Walkers is not acceptable and cannot continue. I fear for the safety of the Walkers and the community at large if he is allowed to continue to escalate his campaign of bullying. In conclusion, our city leaders should be willing and able to take a stance against racism and discrimination in our city. And if they cannot or will not, then they are not worthy of being our leaders.
Our next speakers are Xavier Decano. I hope I said that was close. And then we'll have Jen Dacia as well. So is Mr. Dejan here? Yes, thank you. And you'll go first, and then we'll ask Jen later. So you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. It is Javier Dejanon. Thank you, council members. Mr. Jay Walker wakes up every morning to signs with his face across the street. Meanwhile, the city council criminalizes the houseless. Mr. Jay Walker then goes to garden, and his white neighbor takes photos of him that he then prints for said photographs in his yard. Meanwhile, the city council ignores demands from the people to make a resolution against the genocide in Palestine. Then Mr. Walker complains, and he gets arrested by the cops. He gets charged again and again and again. Mr. Uri takes 50C protective orders against him that get dismissed because they're bogus. Meanwhile, the city council approves plans to wipe out entire neighborhoods to expand the airport. Mr. Walker had a picnic with community members, people here in the audience, teens, minors, children, women. Mr. Uri took pictures of these people with a photograph that is like a golf camera and then prints them. He walks around in front of these people, these guests, with a gun on his pants. Mr. Walker has tried everything to seek justice, to seek some brief rest from this harassment. But of course, this city council is more interested in funding the police. This city council is more interested in criminalizing the houseless. What are you going to do to help Mr. Walker in this city that prides itself in being equitable, that has plans for equity, yet there's a white supremacist running around taking hundreds of pictures every single day of his black neighbors? I demand that you do something for Mr. Walker. Thank you.
All right, before we move on to another topic with our next speaker, we have our police officer, our community relations officer, and Sean Heath, our assistant city manager, who, Mr. Walker, if you would please speak with them so that we can understand more what we've heard, and that I want you to know we listen, and I think Mr. Walker will have the opportunity to talk to this community, or the people that work in this community, to see what we can actually accomplish in this situation. So Mr. Heath, if you would help us. Mr. Walker, if you would actually go out with one of our team leaders. Okay. All right. Our next speaker is Jen Dacia. Thank you. And then we will have Neil Sampson following her. Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Jennifer Diesa, and I'm here on behalf of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Animal Care and Control. First, I want to thank you for approving the zoning necessary for the new shelter expansion. This is a vital step toward addressing the pressing needs of our community animals. However, as we look ahead to the budgeting season, I urge you to secure the necessary funds for the construction of this facility. Our current shelter is overcrowded, understaffed, and not able to meet the demands of our growing city and county, which not only puts a strain on the animals, but also on our dedicated staff who work tirelessly under demanding conditions. It's imperative that we prioritize funding, not just for the shelter's physical structure, but also for the welfare of the animals, the employees, and our community as a whole. Additionally, as we celebrate this progress, we must continue to advocate for the creation of an independent department to manage the shelter. Transitioning away from the CMPD oversight will allow for a more focused and compassionate approach to animal care. An independent department dedicated solely to animal welfare will enable us to implement the best practices and policies that ensure our shelter serves both the animals and our community effectively. In conclusion, let's work together to secure the funds needed for construction and establish an independent management structure. Our community deserves a safe and humane environment for all of its residents, including our animal companions, as well as city staff and volunteers. Thank you for your time and support this evening.
Thank you. Our next two speakers are Niles Sampson and Shanice Williams. Ms. Williams and is Niles Sampson? No, is he here? Is Mr. Sampson here? Okay, then our next speaker with Ms. Williams will be Mika Belong. Mika Belong. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. So we have, I want one speaker, okay? And are you Ms. Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Williams, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Just coming to shed a little light on the Lamplighter Inn, Tanglewood, and Timber Ridge apartments that are having a lot of problems. At the moment, we are suffering as far as housing go. Not all of us are not working. Some of us are really actually working very hard. We have gotten, in a little bit of a bind. Some of us have fallen behind. And we just need a little bit of help to be able to get to the next step. It's about to be Christmas time. I know the Lamplighter Inn, which a lot of us are here from right now, we're having to move out by the 11th. Our children, sorry about them, y'all.
No, they're beautiful. Children are great.
We just really want somewhere safe for them to be, where there's not a lot of drug activities. There are people breaking in rooms. There are people who are doing different things, and our kids aren't safe. And it's not that we're not trying. We're really trying hard. We go to work every day. We just had an obstacle that we couldn't get over. We just need some funding, some help, some housing collaboratives, some supportive housing. There are buildings that can be used for supportive housing for single parents or even just people in general who needs help with that step. Ms. April Lewis is more than willing to help us and have been helping us. She's been one of the best things that's been there for us right now. And we just need someone to help us and hear our story and understand that we are really not bad people because we stay in a hotel or we stay in bad apartments. We're not. We're not. We work hard.
We do not think of you as bad people. You work every day in this town. So do not think of yourself as anything except a member of this community. Thank you.
We just want somewhere safe for our kids. We're having to leave on the 11th. That's right before Christmas.
Yeah. So we are doing a lot of work on this. We understand the issue, the problems. We have understood that we have displacement, and we also know that it's Thanksgiving and it's Christmas. So please just give us the time to think through this and get it done in a way that's respectful to what you have done all the time that you've lived in this community. So thank you very much for coming down and saying that. We'll continue to focus on making sure that people have a place to live and sleep.
And not just from hotel to hotel, permanent housing.
Yes.
We need a permanent place for our kids. not from one hotel that's crappy to the next hotel, and then we find out 2-3 months later that this place is crappy too.
We
It's
understand.
going around town, and it's like, we just really they're building all these nice places. And it may be an eviction, it may be something small, but if somebody would just give us a second chance,
We are
we
working.
deserve it.
And we know that. So thank you very much for speaking to
Thank
us
you.
and telling us your story. Okay, so Micah, you,
My name is Michael Belong, and I'm a minister of the gospel to those on the outside. These people are in this situation because of the systemic injustice caused in this circle, in this council, because you criminalized homelessness, and instead of investing $650 million in the housing that could keep all of these people, all of these children in a house on Christmas, you decided to give that to Daddy Tepper, who makes that in 3 months. Why would you waste money on that when we haven't even made back the money you wasted on him last time? You gave $100 million to affordable housing when your city said we needed $1.1 billion. And instead you're wasting money on a stadium for a jersey that costs $45. That guy is making his own money. Why are you wasting the money that should be housing those children on stupid stadiums? The affordable housing crisis in this city is your responsibility. And there was another child 2,000 years ago who was left without an inn to stay in. And you know what he said? Whatever you do unto the least of these, you have done also to me. It is not enough to tell these people that they can go to coordinated entry, because you know what that looks like? That looks like someone will get back to them in 2 months after they've been homeless for 8 weeks, and then they'll tell them that in 6 months they have someplace to stay, and then in 6 months they won't have someplace to stay because there's another year waiting list, because you have not approved the affordable housing they need to live. Whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to the Son of God. And those of you who believe that we will see that Son of God at the end of times, I'm here as a minister to call you to repentance, to call you to do right by those children. And don't offer them coordinated entry.
Thank you,
Offer them a home.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Our next speaker is Carson Cone, followed by Rick Parrish.
Exactly. That's why I can clap.
Is Mr. Parrish here? So we have Alicia Harvey. If Mr. Parrish is not here, Mr. Cone, you have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening. Respectfully, I would ask that if speakers are told they'll be given 3 minutes, that they be allowed 3 minutes to speak in the future. In 2017, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to an organization known as ICANN for their work drawing attention to the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, as well as the creation of a treaty known as the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the TPNW. Almost half of the world's countries, 94 to be exact, have signed the treaty to date. The World Council of Churches, the Dalai Lama, and Pope Francis also support the treaty. The fact is that nuclear weapons have power for too much devastation, killing, and ruining of innocent civilian lives. For those who would argue that the U.S. needs such weapons for protection, I ask them to consider whether in this global community they place more value on the life of a U.S.-born resident than they would on the life of a foreign-born resident. Among many other U.S. cities, 7 that have expressed support for the treaty include Baltimore, New York, Los Angeles, Durham, Asheville, Chapel Hill, and Washington, D.C. Residents of Charlotte are seriously concerned about the threat that nuclear weapons pose to communities throughout the world. We firmly believe that Charlotteans have the right to live free from this threat. A resolution requesting that the U.S. sign the TPNW. This week, I will email a link of the TPNW to all Charlotte City Council members. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions or concerns?
I don't think there are any questions. We will get back to you if you send the email.
Yes, ma'am.
And the information and the link, so thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right,
Thank
thank you. All right. Ms. Harvey,
Yes.
you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for having me. My name is Alicia Harvey, and I am a current resident at the Lamplighter Inn. And on behalf of those residents, the conditions there at Lamplighter Inn due to bad mismanagement, declining utility and maintenance issues that have declined over the last 8 months there is very inhumane at the Lamplighter. And this is very dear on my heart, you know, to tag on to what Shanice is saying. You know, we are in need of immediate, safe, affordable housings. Most of us came there under Vermille's Place, which was supposed to be transitional housing, and which was false. Now that we know, new management took over, and we didn't understand who we were paying to or who the new owners was, and the conditions just continued to decline there. We are human beings. We are people who work hard. We are people children that go to school, very intelligent individuals, talented, unique people who have formed community. They're at the Lamplighter and doing the best that we can to sustain under conditions that what they are. We have lately been with the water off, not hot water, no lights, no sanitary drinking water, no cable, no TVs, all kind of conditions that's just not favorable for families. And I'm asking today on behalf of the Lamplighter that we get immediate help in this, from the city and the county. I'm begging you. We are not people who don't want nothing in life. I would like to see that narrative change, the way that this city, this county, this nation, and this world looks at homelessness.
Thank you.
We need help. Thank you.
All right, our last speaker is Logan Musson. Was that?
Logan is the last.
Logan Musson.
My name is Logan. I'm a agent for Prospect at the airport. We work under a contract for American Airlines. I assist kids that are traveling alone. I love helping people. That's always what I want to do. I'm one of hundreds of the airport workers that went on strike today. I felt great. I made a difference, and that's all I wanted to do. We went on a strike because we are fed up. We are fed up with the poverty wages and to be treated with respect on the job. Even though I wasn't scared because I know my rights, my coworkers were terrified. Prospect has been threatening to fire us if we went on strike, and that's not fair. We keep the airport running. Without us, traveling is not possible. We shouldn't have to go on strike to be treated with respect. We deserve to be paid wages that are livable. I love this job. I want to keep this job, but I can't live off of $14.50 an hour. And my coworkers are feeling the same. So I'm here because I hope you all support us. I'm going back to work tomorrow, but many of us are scared. They really are threatening us with our jobs. We are asking you to stand with us as we demand more respect and higher wages. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of our public speaking this meeting. We do this once every month, and so please feel free to join us and stay as we go through the remainder of our agenda, which we will now begin with, is it the item 18 or 8?
It should be 33.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
We did 17 to 32 in there.
Let me see. We're on item eight, the item 8 in the agenda. 2, 6, 8, 9, 17 agenda review. We have a series of public hearings. All right, so we have a hearing, item number 8, a public hearing on a resolution to close a portion of alleyway between 1609 and 1615 Matheson Avenue. Do we have any speakers? No speakers. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor of the closure, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes. The next item, do we have item number 9? We're going to have a public hearing on the resolution to close a portion of Cecil Street. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers?
No, ma'am.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? No one opposes. Item number 10, a public hearing on a resolution to close a portion of Century Post Road. We're now going to open a public hearing if we need to. Anyone here, Madam Clerk, sign up?
No, ma'am.
All right, we don't have any sign-ups.
Second.
Motion to close and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes. Now we'll go to we're now going to open the public hearing on Blue Mount on Steel Creek voluntary annexation. Do we have any speakers?
No, ma'am.
You don't have any speakers. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
The motion needs to include that we adopt an annexation ordinance with an effective date of November the 25th, 2024, to extend the corporate limits to include this property and assign it to the adjacent City Council District 3.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, any opposed? No, no one is opposed. The next item is a public hearing on the decision on Marion R. and Levon Marsh House as a historic designation. This is item 12 on your agenda. Do we have anyone
No, ma'am.
signed up for the public hearing? I think we see the staff person here and say hello. Anything that we need to know? Signing up. So with that, do we have a motion to adopt an ordinance with an effective date of November the 25th, 2024, designating the property known as Marion R. and Levon Marsh House and with the parcel identification number of 153-061-11 as a historic landmark?
Move to adopt and close the hearing.
Second. We have a motion and a second. If you had no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? So that passes as well. We'll go to the next item of policy, which is item 13. And do we have anything else to talk
No,
about
ma'am.
under the manager's report? Thank you. We'll do that at the next meeting. So the next item, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson?
I have a question from the manager's report. So we heard some really important issues today, and I know that we're not allowed to respond to our public as a council. It's really hard. I think that we should be able to, especially when there's issues like that, but I would like an update on some of the things they talked about. Is that okay? Some of the things we are working on, such as displacement.
Yeah.
Can we get, and do you have an update? Can we get some
I think
type
that we
of?
can get something to you tomorrow. A manager, what do you think?
Sure. In your packet
Packet.
Thursday, we put together a series of documents that explain what was going on and what the city is doing, as well as I believe the mayor did a referral
Yes.
to the Housing and Safe Communities Committee. But I can make sure that we send that back to the top of your
I think it's important that the public knows that, but I did call, I can't remember, somebody from Housing, I don't know if it was Sean or Rebecca, and ask about the displacement. I know Lamplighter Inn is on our radar, and there was another one, I can't remember the name of them.
So
One of them is actually in my district, Councilmember Johnson.
That's lamplighter.
Which is my first time
What's the name
hearing
of
this.
it? Lamplighter and what else?
Timber Ridge
No,
and Tanglewood.
Tanglewood.
Tanglewood, right.
So Timber Ridge,
It's in my district. And
when
I
I
just,
spoke to someone last week, that wasn't on our radar yet. So I don't know, well, we were working on two, so I want to make sure that all three of them, that there's a plan. I don't know if it was, so make sure we're working on all three of those, a plan for
Okay.
those. Okay. And then I also had a question about the racial harassment. And maybe you can give this to us later. I think I sent an email to the chief and to Patrick Baker, but is there an ordinance that would prohibit that type of behavior and something that can be done from the city perspective? I'd like to know what can be done. Because it's not that we're not, speaking for myself and probably most of us, we're not willing to do something. What do we have the ability to do?
I think it would be helpful, I received a letter of how many places have gone. We have helped. We have addressed this with our Community Relations Committee. It's gone through CMPD. We need to figure out what didn't happen. So I think some of this has been out there for a while. I think Ms. Molina, she and I talked this morning about this because it's in her district, and she has a very deep, you can see from the,
Right. Okay.
and so, but I think that what we have to figure out is what didn't happen instead of what did happen.
Well, what I was thinking, I know we passed the NDO, so the non-discrimination ordinance, and I know that was for employment, and what teeth do we have surrounding that? And can we expand that to residential or to something else? Does the Non-Discrimination Act, that apply here? But I think.
I don't know the answer
right,
to that. So we
we-
need to get some legal advice, and we'll try to do that so that we can go in a path that we don't guess what we're trying to
Okay,
accomplish.
I mean, I'd like some information. It just, we sat here and didn't respond. I'm sorry that you know, but I think the public should know that it does concern us. We just aren't allowed to respond. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Molina.
Thank you really quickly, because I, now that we've kind of said something, I don't want to go through the semantics of it, but there is an awareness, and what one of the residents said is right. Our deputy city attorney actually sat in on a meeting with me, one of the several meetings that I've held regarding this issue. So I anticipate, like the mayor said, that we'll have some additional information to come out. I did send a memo to you guys. It's 2 pages completed to give you an update on all that's been done so far. And, all of the information that I have internally. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And then, I anticipate that the manager and the team will give us any information, and I hope to be able to disseminate that as well to the community members that are particularly interested, as far as, what we can do from a city perspective, because that's, what we'll be able to answer for. And there were some answers about other entities. We can't speak to that specifically, but, I'm hoping to get our answers firmly so that I can disseminate that information.
Thank you. As elected officials, I think it's important that we do respond to that. Thank you.
All right, so,
Councilmember Brown.
yes, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I would just have to say to what Councilmember Johnson has said, and definitely my heart goes out to my colleague, Councilmember Marjorie Molina. That is a tough situation. She's highly intelligent. I'm sure that she's doing all she can to do what she can in that community. As far as the lamplighter and the animal shelter, I've already spoke, so I feel, but Mayor, understand where we're coming from. When this is a community forum, people are looking, they see it. One, you can't say anything to me, not you, Mayor, with all due respect, people in the audience. I'm gonna say something back. If I can't, I need to see where I can't, because I am not going to allow anybody just to paint a picture. I care. It matters to me. It really does, because we work hard. We're coming together as we go to the end of the year. Maybe some things start here, we try to disseminate things down. I'm not gonna be what they call us, and you are what you answer to, so I'll let people know that's not fair. When they come in here in a public forum, we can only just listen. We can't say anything. So our silence can be perceived as whatever they wanted to be perceived as, and I refuse to let that happen. How I vote is public record, but maybe folk don't know that. But I sit together as a whole, as a council. I'm not gonna let ignorance just speak out to me in whatever way they think they can, because that's not going to happen. It's not gonna happen.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ashmira? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with what my colleagues have said. It's important to respond, whether that response comes from you as the mayor or the city manager. Some of this public speakers that spoke are probably something that you expected, right? I mean, lamplighting, or even the water main break, racial harassment. We need to have some sort of report to the council ahead of time so that we know what we're dealing with. And I remember, Mr. Jones, you used to send us a report after public speakers addressing everyone's concerns, and I haven't seen that in my package lately. So I think having that in a consistent manner would be helpful, because otherwise it seems like, yeah, we are hearing it, but I don't know what are the next steps, other than the staff talks to them, but really we don't know what was the outcome of that. So I think having that would be important.
Yeah, so I'm surprised that we're not giving you those back in your reports. I'll double check. And we did anticipate that lamplighter in, and that's why we put so much in your packet on Thursday,
Right.
so that you wouldn't be flat-footed tonight.
Yeah, and the
I think there are
With respect
times
to you, Councilmember Graham,
I wasn't done.
I'm sorry, but that's a short period of time for you as a district rep. It just doesn't seem fair to the housing committee and yourself with what we got with lamplighter. That's a disaster over there.
No, I've been involved in talking with staff for days.
Days?
When this became an issue, and actually went over there once or twice myself. And the package, the information we received in the package on Thursday was very comprehensive and outlined the steps that we were taking and why we were taking those steps. And the referral that the mayor made to the committee to take a broader look at what we were doing. So I'm not sure, I felt prepared and felt that the council should have been prepared based on the information that was distributed to us last week.
No, sir.
So I still have the floor. The information that was in our package about the lamplighter aid wasn't communicated to folks in the room, and I think that's where the gap is, because they feel like we are not listening.
I concur.
Even though we are doing a lot of work, there is so much that is happening, but I feel like the information is not being communicated to the public. So I think that's it. Same thing with water main break, right? We got this whole package, and here we are sitting, we have no idea as to what has happened. This individual inherited thousands of dollars in bills. We don't know, we haven't gotten any update on that. And I know that staff has been working on this for a while. So how come we didn't get any information on that? We haven't gotten any information on animal care and control. I appreciate the work that's being done in terms of the rezoning, and that's great. I think what I am concerned about is that we are getting information about the topics that are being picked, cherry-picked for us, not everything that is being brought to our attention. So I think if we can just have a comprehensive information from A to Z, that would help.
So
Can I make a suggestion?
I'm sorry, so I think it's important, we get a speakers list on Friday.
Right.
So we don't know what people are going to come up. I mean, clerk gets speakers all through the week, but we get a list, about the same time that maybe you guys get your packet. And I will say that staff have communicated with many of the folks at the Lamplighter Inn. We just didn't throw something in your packet.
Exactly.
There have been communications. There have been, daily communication. So we will try to get you the information maybe in a different way, but I don't want you to think that we cherry pick. It's just that someone, the last person who signed up just now. So there's no way we would have known what they were going to ask us.
Oh, got it. So
Yeah.
in that case, there is a
maybe-
balance there because we do get people that come in. And even if you said, this is what I know that you're going to talk about, it's very seldom what you're going to talk about. And so often we do try to figure out and reach out to people that have called in. I mean, the clerk's office calls them. We get a sheet and it has information on it, but it's very seldom the same consistent information because we're all human. You know, you come in and you've got, you know, a crowd like that, you're going to talk differently than if it were someone just one-on-one with the council. And I'm sure that on Fridays, when these packets go out, that we certainly can get more information in them, but that's not going to guarantee that we have the accuracy that you would want to have, because the last thing you want to do is say, we're going to help you at the lamplighter, and then not have the capacity or the ability to do it. Just like when Marjorie and I talked this morning. I talked about the man, Mr. Walker, and it's very difficult when you've got people from the DA's office, you've got people from the United States Attorney's Office, you've got people in the CMPD, you've got community relations. So how do you know? You know, these are things that are very important to people.
So
And
maybe
we have to really, I think, work on making sure that we're accurate.
So may I suggest if we can get a follow-up report after the public speaker forum? So now that we heard from all of the public speakers, if we can get a follow-up report on what each person spoke, here is the follow-up. So for an example, water main break, here is where the status is. I think having that would be important afterwards. I understand we may not get all the information ahead of time, but now we have the information, so I think getting an email update tomorrow or day after tomorrow would be helpful.
All right, I think that Ms. Watlington was next, and then Mr. Graham.
Yeah, if I just want to make a suggestion, and if it's already somewhere out there, I'd love to learn about it, but I agree with the point that it's really, sometimes it feels like communication is about managing us versus getting information out to the public. Like, as long as those of us who are sitting around the dais know what's going on, then everything is fine. And I think that part can be an opportunity for us to communicate to the people, because while we may not know who the speakers are until Friday, none of these topics are brand new, right? We know what the pulse of the community is just based on the emails that we get in volume and the things that the news picks up, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'd like to suggest, if we don't have it already, and if we do, again, let me know, is that we just make a simple QR code, hot topics. If you're in the audience and you're sitting here and you want to speak on something, and there's a report sitting in front of me of 2 pages of what we've done, just let people go to the QR code and read up on the topic they care about. It might, you know, save us from getting a whole bunch of ire with inaccurate information, because we're sitting here looking at it and they don't have the benefit of it. And maybe if they did, their comments would be different, or they might not have come down here on a Monday night when they could have been at home. So if we could figure out how to push information, be a very easy way where people can go look at information that they care about on a particular topic, then that might save us some time. But again, if we have it already, I'm happy to help push it.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Well,
Graham.
I love it.
Mr. Graham?
Yes, I think it's just, as Ms. Johnson said earlier, the inability to communicate what we've already done, right? And certainly, the council response to the issue of the lamplighter, I thought was well documented and well reported out to council members last week. Certainly on our desk is a comprehensive write-up about the racism issue. Certainly, I wanted to scream and holler about it, being personally impacted by it, but we have this rule that we don't communicate, right? Because we want to make sure that we're not communicating based on emotions, but based on things that we can actually accomplish and not selling false hope. So I'm not sure how we fill that gap, right, when we know hypothetically, you know, the topics of the issues coming before us. QR code, I'm not sure that might work, I'm not sure, but certainly if there's a way for us to provide information that we have as a body to the public in in a way that when they, and some folks just won't care what's written, right? Because they are emotionally attached to the topic, right? So that's where they are. I'm emotionally attached to any conversation about racism based on my personal experience, right? So, you know, it is just how do we, it's a process issue. And one of the things I keep saying over and over again for the last several weeks and months is how we process our work that we keep stumbling over. Mr. Manager, is how we process the work and how we disseminate information to those who need it and when they need it. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Mayor,
Um,
my hand was actually up.
Ms. Brown?
Yeah,
Yes.
it was up before Mr. Graham, but with all due respect, you just didn't see it. I just want to say it was never about the speakers list. It was not, for me. It is making sure that I am equipped, along with my colleagues, on how we can be responsive to executing and allocating this information to the community. While it may be Mr. Graham's district, folk know that I'm near and dear, and they got it mixed up. Because I spoke to staff earlier today, when the media called me, they said District 3. They sent me the maps and the lines to show that it was District 2, but very close to District 3. Regardless of who district it is, I get one vote with all of my colleagues around this desk. And when it's all said and done, I care, whether it's in District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. If it's happening in any of the districts, people are looking to be displaced, misplaced, however you want to say it. Those folks have children that they care about, that's their home. Irregardless of what the conditions are, that is their home. Those children only know that that's their home, that's where love is, that's where their parents are, their mothers are. So to me, days is not enough. It's just not enough. I don't know. How do we get into where we get something so drastic like that? We just get the information in days and it's okay. It's not okay just to get that information in days. And the package last Thursday is not okay for me. It's not enough time to digest that and then be equipped with the resources and information and knowledge that I need to disseminate it back into the community. That's from me. And the media came to me. And I went to staff with all due respect. And I think I did a very good job today on my interview and communicating with staff to take their lead and their information, which I didn't have to do that because I wasn't elected by staff. I was elected by my constituents. So I could have just interviewed off of my passion and my experience, but I went to staff with all due respect.
Yeah. I think we all understand it's been a long day and a long night and a lot of tough issues that are going on in the city right now. So as we're continuing this, I think the most important thing is that we try to get the information on where we are on housing and emergency housing. This isn't the first time that we've had people have to vacate a hotel, and at some point we can try to figure out what is our system and who are our partners in doing this, because that's a huge part of the success of making sure that people get housed before. And I believe that if we can then also talk about and remember, the committee is going to meet on housing, and I've asked every council member to participate in that because it needs every idea. And it's like you said, if you're in District 3, you're in District 2, you don't know what that means. It can be something that all of us need to look at. And so that's what we've been asked to, we are asking all of the council members what you did, where you were at the NLC. What did you find that was actually resonating with you? What do they say? A really good council member follows one of the persons that they found out, but a great council member copies them. So let's figure out how we can copy places that are really doing this good work around housing or around in our safety and all of that. I think that's really the way that we can go. And all of these ideas, if we would actually have the ability to have small meetings and see each other in the hallway, that might help us a little bit. And I know it's not everyone and it's not possible for everyone, but I think a lot of this is when we're together, we actually do better. I think it's always been as a council that we're best when we are talking with each other and really trying to figure out how to resolve the issues that we have in the community. So with that, I don't think we have any, oh, we do have more work to do. Let's talk about the restaurant. That's exactly what we need to do right now. So which item is that one? 14. All right, anybody want the information on that or that? Whatever. Okay. Item 14. The action is to adopt a resolution approving the lease of approximately 4,700 square feet of city-owned property at 1600 East 4th Street to Government Restaurant LLC for the operation of a restaurant and authorize the manager to execute the documents appropriately. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
We
Second.
have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No question.
All right, we'll start with Ms. Brown, and then we'll go to Ms. Johnson.
I just want to know, so Showmars is going to be leaving.
Let's see, we need to get our real estate people up, and
Thank you.
so that we can have this conversation, and questions can be asked and answered.
Good evening, Phil Rieger of General Services.
Okay.
I thought you was getting ready to say something else. Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I'm just asking, Showmars is in place now. Are they still there?
They are still there,
Okay, they're
yes.
still there. Do they have a time that they're going to be out?
Their lease has expired. They are month to month, and so the way this current lease is set up is would be a transition starting on December 25th. And
So their last day would be the 25th of December 2024?
Technically, the 24th, we
oh,
would still be in, and then the city would be closed the 25th through the 28th, the following Monday, and the transition would happen over that weekend.
So we're going to be looking for someone else to come in? We're taking bids? How's this working?
Now, this item, it recommends to enter into a lease with what's called Pita Boy. It's also called Costas Kitchen. And Costas Kitchen has developed a specific limited liability corporation in order to enter into this lease with us. So Costas Kitchen would be the new restaurant in that space.
Peter Boy, Costa's Kitchen, okay.
And we used an RFP to make that selection.
Okay. Is there going to be a gap in providing services?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so they're going to come right in and start, so there's no gap. So folks in the building that need to eat on the outside that are used to coming here for lunch will still be able to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
That was my concern. Thank you so much. I yield to my colleague.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this rent amount considered market rate?
Yes, ma'am. We did an appraisal and negotiated this amount with the restaurant. It's a market rate.
And there was an RFP?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is Pita, what's it called, Pita Boy?
Peter Boy Incorporated.
Pita Boy and Shomar, is there any business relationship?
Yes, ma'am. So the relationship is simply that the owner of the current Showmars is the owner of Pita Boy or Costas Kitchen. The difference is the Showmars that's currently our restaurant is franchised. Costas Kitchen is an independent establishment, and that comes with great advantages because it allows the owner to create a much more flexible menu, and they don't have to follow all the rules that the Showmars franchise requires of their restaurants.
Okay, and I can't remember, I believe Shomar's, the rent was under market value, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So it has a long history. Back in 2019, the Showmars restaurant was paying a $3,000 a month lease payment. Council in 2019 authorized a reduction because the restaurant was losing money. And then we went into a period of pandemic, which really threw sort of that restaurant space into an uncertain period. They stuck with us. Showmar stuck with us, but the lease has expired. There was no option to renew, and so we felt it was important to put this back out for RFP.
So there was no option for Shomar's to renew?
No, the 2019 amendment, when the lease was reduced, only allowed that period of time to the end of their first 5 years, and so the lease expired.
So I will, and is there anywhere in the background or in this explanation that it's the same owners? Is there any disclosure about that? I didn't read it, I just felt like they were related just based on the type of restaurant and the name.
I do not believe that we named the owner in this. That wouldn't be something that we traditionally do. Don't traditionally call out names.
This also states this is a real estate leasing contract and it's exempt under the CBI program. The fact that it's exempt under the CBI program, the fact that it's the same owner that just happened to win the RFP, I won't be supporting this, this contract. It just, we talk about equity, we talk about opportunity, inclusivity, and this contract just does not appear to support that, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor and then a second. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. All right, our next item. This item, we do not have a closed session, but we do have item 16. 15. Yes. Shelton Knoll Apartments Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Preservation and Rental Subsidy Support to approve $1.1 million of the Housing Trust Fund allocation to Arrowhawk NOAA, an affiliate of Ascent Housing, for the acquisition and rehabilitation of Shelton Knoll Apartments. Approve the annual reimbursement to the Housing Collaborative in an amount not to exceed the development city tax bill for naturally occurring affordable housing rental subsidy program over a 20-year period for 7 new long-term rental subsidies at Shelton Knoll Apartments for households earning 30% and below the median area income. Authorize the manager to negotiate and make the process to complete the transaction. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, absolutely.
All right,
110%.
Ms. Johnson, Ms.
No,
Brown.
Ms. Brown, yeah. So I support it. I do have several points that I'd like to make. This property is an older property, similar to Southside Homes, similar to Delahaye Courts, was built and developed in the early 1980s, which was Charlotte Housing Authority, and now it's living into 1996. My only concern, and I hope would be the concern of the council and everyone else, the population that's there now is a population that goes to work every day and cannot afford an expensive income. So I'm curious as to how many residents that live over there now will still have the opportunity to live over there once it's done. Anybody want to speak in detail about that?
Rebecca Hefner is going to speak to you about that.
Good evening, Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services. The short answer to your question is all of them. So the residents that are currently living in Shelton Knoll will remain. Those residents are all at or around 60% AMI based on the current rent structure. And as those units turn over, they will be converted to the 30, 60, or 80% units. But the residents that are currently there will be able to stay according to their lease agreements. So the NOAA guidelines that you all have in place as a council are an anti-displacement play to ensure that as these kind of properties turn over, that residents will not be displaced.
So thank you so much, Rebecca. I know that you do amazing work. You work really hard, and thank you for bringing that information just for the public hearing so everybody could hear it. I got a phone call earlier. I said I would support it, but I did want to get some information. The information that you're giving to me is it's appreciated, and I just want to ask a question. So they're going to stay during the renovation? They're not going to move out and have the opportunity to come back? Because a lot of times when they move out, we know that they're not coming back. They get comfortable where their new home is, and so that's my question and my concern.
Sure. So the renovations that are planned are essentially things like roofing, HVAC, some electrical, some things like that. And so most of them will not require that residents move out completely. If there is a unit that might need more extensive repairs, that will be handled on an individual basis. But if residents need to leave for any time, they will be able to return according to their existing lease agreement. So there's no displacement of the residents.
So hearing that there's no displacement of the residents, I support. Thank you, Ms. Hefner.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Rebecca. You do a great job. But I heard you say the residents will stay according to their lease agreements. Will they have the option to renew their leases?
So, yes, I mean, the goal of the NOAA program is to allow residents to stay. And as there's lots of turnover in lots of apartment communities, as that natural turnover occurs, if people choose to leave and then the apartments are vacated, it's that point at which they will be transitioned from the current 60% AMI into either 30% or 80% according to the number of commitments per unit that are listed in the action.
Maybe we can talk offline, because I'm thinking if they renew their lease, then when is that unit renovated, and how long are they able to stay or have a first right of refusal or something? So I want to understand the transition. I'll be supporting it. I support Ascent Housing. They do a great job, but I would like more information as far as that transition.
Sure, we can follow up.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ms. Ashmira?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a great NOAA model because we are competing with the private sector, where we have seen hedge funds buying up a lot of the older apartments and doing an upgrade and jacking up rents. So this is a great model to preserve affordable housing in our city. And this is a great way to protect families from displacement and really create housing options for people with modest income households. So I really appreciate the work that Mark Etheridge and his team is doing to preserve affordable housing in our community. So I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Mayor, Madam Mayor,
Ms. Brown?
my district, so one last thing. Rebecca, again, I do appreciate you and all the work that you did earlier today as well. My concern is, I do support it, but I'm very concerned because it's a community that's very near and dear to me, and it's a historic community. And we're losing our historic communities, and I just want to make sure that I'm signing on to the right thing and listening to you and what you said and your transparency. I think, and I know that I can vote moving forward to say yes. And I just want you to know that. And that's where I'm coming from, okay? I yield to you, Mayor.
All right, any other comments? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. So that item is, we move on to item 16. Recommended uses for American Rescue Plan funds, approved $25,401,000 and a little bit more from the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund for government services to offset the revenue lost as a result of COVID-19 public health emergency, and adopt a budget ordinance appropriating said amount from the General Operating Fund to the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
We have a second and a motion. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing no questions and comments, all in favor of the item, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed to it?
I was
All
in
right.
favor.
Thank you. All right, so we do not have a closed session. To those of you who have taken the ability and the time to watch us on television, I want to say have a happy Thanksgiving to all of our community residents, and we hope that we will see you safely and enjoy your family, however you describe it, just make sure that you keep yourselves well and safe. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned.